Coming up next, live coverage of the Irondequoit Planning Board.
In order, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Welcome to tonight's Irondequoit Planning Board meeting. Please be aware of the fire exit, which is to your left of the room. In the event of an emergency, please move in a calm and orderly fashion down the stairs and do not use the elevator. The meetings are recorded by the secretary for the purpose of a record in minutes. So please identify yourself each time you come to the podium and speak into the microphone. The board will follow the items in the order that they appear on the agenda. Extra copies, which are located near the door. After the case has been called, the applicant and/or representative shall come to the podium, identify themselves, give their address, and then present their case. The planning board members will then have an opportunity to question the applicant. If the case is a public hearing, it will be open for public input, at which time anyone wishing to speak to the board regarding the application will come to the podium, and I'm going to remind everybody, please get your thoughts together. You only have one opportunity to come to the podium. It's not, you get to come back up. Identify yourselves along with your address and direct any questions to the board. There is a 5-minute limit on input, and that will be timed. Once all public input has been completed, the applicant or site representative will be given the opportunity to respond to any public input. Once all public input has been completed and all questions have been satisfied, the case will be closed to public input and the board will then move on to a decision. No further input is allowed after that point. And with that, call the first case.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First item on our agenda is case number PB 2020-02-1. Upon the matter of request by Tailored Architecture PLLC, acting as agent for Robert and Christina Brinkman, for site plan approval and floodplain and coastal erosion hazard environmental protection overlay district EPOD permit to construct a new single-family dwelling on premises 930 Rock Beach Road in an R1 residential district.
Thank you. My name is Jonathan Taylor with Tailored Architecture. My address is 38907 Dalton Lane, Clayton, New York, 13624. I'm here to present the Brinkman project for site plan approval. I believe everyone's fairly familiar with the drawings, and I guess for everyone's effort, I'll just go through the whole project again from the start. The first sheet, the G1.0 drawing, shows rendering views from various angles of the project. It also gives, each floor level areas in this project data box for any informational purposes. The second drawing, which is C1.0, shows the existing site plan. This is a vacant lot. There was a house here. I'm not sure how long ago it was raised, but it is no longer there. It's been vacant, I believe, for quite a few years. The driveway that is shown on here is existing to the applicant's current property, which is adjacent to this, which they intend to sell and move into this project. The third drawing, which is C1.0, shows the proposed house on the site, clearly delineating the coastal erosion hazard area as a gray, sort of dark band across here. There's an existing seawall down toward the beach. The driveway at this point in time is to remain. The house is completely behind the coastal erosion hazard area, and we have since received a letter from the DEC stating that no permit was required, which I believe you guys are in possession of. We also showed some of the exterior lighting, proposed exterior lighting at this point in time. for the project. If any of that stuff changes in any way, we will certainly resubmit. Drawing A 1.0 shows the basement level. This level does have a garage door access, but is solely for perhaps a gator or something along the beach, yard equipment, lawnmowers, etc. The bulk of this level is for storage, mechanical areas. There is a wine cellar. I'm calling it a small living space because of the wine cellar, the elevator, and the stairs up to the first floor. Drawing A 1.1 shows the first floor living plan. This is where the bulk of the living is happening. There is a garage attached to the house that I believe conforms to the zoning regulations. Stairwell to the basement, 2 stairwells to the second floor, kitchen, family, living room, and an office space and some small mechanicals, as well as the elevator and stairwell. A 1.2 shows the second floor plan, which shows 2 bedrooms, an attic storage area, a generous master closet, stairwell, master bath, elevator, stairs and hall, and a laundry area. A 1.4 nobody ever really seems to care about, but this is the roof plan, if anyone is interested. A 2.0 is the north elevation. This is toward the lake. This side of the project is a slightly more contemporary feel. We have some corner glass windows to try to optimize the view. There's a terrace, a small pergola. The east elevation does show the basement level garage door access, kind of cut into the bank. For visual purposes, this is the tallest elevation because the bulk of the house is cut into the bank and underground, but from this elevation you can see that lower level. A 2.2 is the south elevation. This would be the elevation from Rock Beach Road. It is a private road at that point. I believe it's gated. But if you were looking from that side of the house, this would be the elevation you would see. There's a slightly more contemporary style back here. Excuse me. Parapet walls. Dashed in, you can see the actual roof line. This would be the main entry, and these windows here are in the garage, which is accessed in that manner. Lastly is the west elevation. This one is up against the neighboring property line. It has a pretty good bush cover there now. We'll probably be planting some more trees there potentially. But again, if anything changes from the proposed site plan, we would represent for your purposes. It shows you the man door, the garage doors, a couple windows. This is where the condensing units would be located and a backup generator. We are seeking a height variance for this project with the zoning board, which will be meeting, I believe, in 2 weeks. Beyond that, I believe we're here for site plan approval based on the location of the project on the lakefront and the coastal erosion hazard area. Thank you.
Thank you. Does the board have any questions?
Go ahead.
It's more of a question for staff. In the Conservation Board's letter, there's a request that the town engineer determine whether the 16-foot distance from the crown of the steep slope is adequate. Did the town engineer see any of these plans or have any comments?
So the town engineer didn't have to review at this stage. However, we can ensure that the town engineer can review prior to the issuance of building permit. The proposed building site has been determined to be outside of the regulated the CHA. The coastal erosion hazard area, and that coastal erosion hazard area tends to align pretty well with the cliff and dune, like the change in topography along the lakefront. But we can ensure that they look at it prior to construction.
Great. That's all I have. Thanks.
And on the west elevation, how close are those condensers to the neighbors?
Well, let me see. The condensers themselves, I'm gonna say, based on the 15-foot setback to the roof line, are probably about 13 feet away from the property line.
And from the neighbor's house?
From the neighbor's property line. From
Okay.
their house, I mean, I could put a scale ruler to it on your full-scale drawings, but I'm gonna guess that that's 55 feet.
Okay, I'm good. Thank you.
Mr. Reed, did you get a copy of the Conservation Board?
I did, and I noticed their request for the construction drawings with silt fencing and all of that, and we certainly would provide all of that prior to the building permit. At this point in time, we're trying to see if we can get approved before we dig it that far in.
Okay, was there anything on the letter that concerned you? Any other comments?
No, we have since received the DEC no permit required letter, so I feel comfortable with all of their other concerns.
Thank you. That's all I have. Mr. Palermo?
No.
Nothing.
Nothing? Okay, you can have a seat at this time.
Thank you.
This is a public hearing. Open the public hearing. Anybody who would like to talk about this case, please come to the podium. State your name, address, and please remember the 5-minute rule.
Hi, my name is Kirsten Warner. I'm directly next to the Brinkman property to the west. I've never been at one of these hearings before, and 1 week ago, or a little over a week ago, got the notification in the mail that this was happening. And I'm extremely concerned for a number of reasons, and I'll try to be concise. One, 13 feet from the property line to have condensers facing my property is extremely concerning. There's no way it's 55 feet to my house. It's much closer than that. And 13 feet from my property line, having that is going to definitely have an adverse effect on my property value. From a noise standpoint, I have 3 little children. That's just from a noise standpoint, but obviously I'm not very clear on how close to the lake he's building. It appears that he's looking for a height variance, which will hands down obstruct my view, decreasing the property value. I'm extremely concerned as well about erosion. The water level is extremely high. And I'm not clear on where from the lake level, is that based on current lake levels or what the lake levels were prior? Because currently where the steep cliff comes down in big waves and a northerly breeze, the water's hitting against my break wall, which would be at the bottom of the beach. So if he's building anywhere near that zone, I'm extremely concerned about the erosion and how that's going to impact my property as well. Again, I haven't had an opportunity to view these plans. Is this something that I could be made aware of?
Yes, they're available. They were available at by the staff at the town hall.
Okay,
That's what your card should have told you. You could
okay.
inquire. I believe, correct me if I'm wrong.
So the postcard does provide a phone number, and the planning board, the posting of the public hearing sign on the property as well provides a number. Happy to email you the plans so you can take a look at them, or if I'd be happy to show them to you. We can step out and I can show you in the
Okay.
hallway.
But at this point, if he's asking for variances, that's something that you would approve here today?
No, that's the zoning board.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, again, just to, I'm assuming I'm pretty close to my 5 minutes, but my primary concern would be the adverse effect that this has on my property value, the fact that he's putting the part of his house that has the condensers, it's a major eyesore.
The other major concern I have, if you look at the plans, he currently lives 2 properties away. When people come to cut his lawn or clean his house, they're currently parking on my property. You can see on the map that as soon as my grass starts, and that's where he's currently parking, so I can only imagine what it's going to be like when he's living directly next door. I've got kids that are on bikes, I've got, children riding around on skateboards, and I'm concerned about their safety. So,
Can
I guess
just
that's
ask
all I
one
have.
clarification?
Yes.
You said water level high, the current lake level, or prior to what?
the lake level that has increased in the last 4 years.
Prior to the last 4 years?
And currently what's happening is, and again, I need to review where they're proposing to build, but the water level comes all the way up to the base of that cliff that he's referring to. So that's definitely
I
good.
just wanted clarity. You said
Okay.
prior, so I didn't know what you meant by prior.
And maybe I should ask you the question, is the distance from the lake determined by the previous lake level or where it currently is?
You can ask the question, we'll get to staff if they know. the
Okay, and then another question I would have is,
I'll answer the questions when the applicant
okay,
comes back.
and then what's the regulation in terms of how far he can build a house from the property line?
I'm sure we can answer all of those.
Okay, and then what is the height, the rule on what the maximum height of a house should be? So, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, Krista, what was your address? 896 Rock Beach Road. Thank you.
Anybody else that cares to speak about this? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing. Would the applicant like to, Carrie, would you like to address some of those questions first, or?
I'm happy to address a few of them. The issue of so the distance that's being measured isn't necessarily from the lake level, it's actually from the property line. Additionally, this parcel in particular is limited to where the buildable area is based on the location of the coastal erosion hazard area. And so quite a bit of the property, probably in the vicinity, if you're looking at the survey instrument map, there's a heavy dotted line that shows the start of the coastal erosion hazard area. And that's approximately, right, there isn't a measurement shown, but it's quite a distance from the edge of the property going lakeward. And I can get a measurement for you if I grab the different scale. We have a scale here, but not the right one. Additionally, do you have an architectural scale?
Just a point of clarification for me, Carrie, who
Yep.
determines the CEHA line?
The New York State Department of Environmental Conservation.
Okay, so it's not a town boundary.
It's not a town boundary or a town regulation, it's actually the state's. And so we actually advise applicants to go to the DEC first to see if and where they're allowed to develop on a particular piece of property in light of a coastal erosion hazard area.
Thanks.
So they were looking for this distance to the property line. Or is this your property line?
Yeah, this distance is the next drawing.
Okay. And then, as for height, because this is located in this property is regulated under 235-76, which is the additional waterfront regulations, the height requirements for various uses is actually, the code directs us to go to chapter 235-33C. The fact that I'm remembering all of this off the top of my head is really fun. I'm 99% sure it's 33C, it may be 35C. Is it 33C? And a single-family home, there they provide that the max building height is 25 feet to the start of the second floor. So it's a little bit different than a standard max building height in a single
Ceiling of the second floor.
the ceiling of the second floor. Forgive me. Thank you. So ceiling of the second floor is the max building height. So ceiling of the second floor, 25 feet. That's a little bit different than a standard single-family zoning district, which is typically 24 feet to the midline of the roof. So here, because of its waterfront location, we actually are directed to go to the waterfront height standard. And so the calculation, that's something that the zoning board would be taking up as part of a variance application.
And then, can you just address the setback question for the,
Yeah, hang on, before we go there, I want to ask the applicant, what is the dimension to the ceiling of the second floor? The actual proposed dimension?
So, there was some discrepancy in the code as well, because we have flat ceilings in the bulk of the second floor, we have slope ceilings in the master bedroom.
Right, let's assume we're going to sort of the rim board or the top plate of the wall for a second.
If we're going to that elevation, on A 2.0, you guys actually have the most updated drawing.
And it's dated February 18th, and the most updated drawing, it's A20.
It's actually 24 foot, 11 and a half inches. And would actually be conforming to the zoning regulation if we go to that number.
Just for our viewers at home that didn't hear that, that was 24 and a half.
24 foot, 11 and a half
11 and a half
inches.
inches, okay.
Half an inch under the regulation. If we were to go to the peak, obviously we'd be higher, and if we were on the typical zoning regulation, which is not, I guess,
So the code is, it specifically says for height, see here, and it
Right,
takes
so-
you a different section of code.
So I know this is not our jurisdiction because it's a zoning related issue.
It is,
but
yeah.
Why does this require a variance then?
Well, initially,
They were going midpoint of roof
midpoint to
slope.
a roof line, and so using that as a definition, and also that there are varying
Slopes of ceilings.
slope, but depending
More of
on
a
whether you were
clarification
north
issue,
or
potentially.
south.
More of a potential clarification issue on definition, then they may not even need a variance
They may not need,
potentially.
they may not need, we have to verify the condition and the elevations at grade.
Thank you, I'm sorry.
no, that's all right. Carrie, just real quickly, the setback,
So in the setbacks, there are no special provisions in the waterfront district with respect to so we go to the underlying zoning there. So it's, on the side setback, it's 10% of the width of the lot, no greater than 15. And then we have a neighborhood average on the street side, no less than 30. And then for the waterfront, it's no structure is, that's also deemed a front yard. And I'm gonna check the regulation, but I believe the setback's at least minimum of 25 feet, no structure within 25 feet of the water's edge.
just for the record, we're currently at 137 feet from the water's edge. And if you wanted to go to the seawall, which you mentioned, I believe, previously, we're 45 feet behind the seawall. Well above any elevations that would be a floodplain concern.
How about to the west property line?
15 feet to the west property line, so we're conforming there.
and can
That's
you
to
just
the
answer the concern about the
overhang.
condenser again? I mean, that's sort of why I asked you the question to begin with, because I know it's gonna be a noise issue.
So there's currently quite a bit of bushes along that line. We have them tucked in as close as we can to the house. I don't believe they fall into the setback category. We're happy to plant more bushes and things along that line to help reduce noise. If we need to, we could probably build a screen to help reduce noise. But there is, no doubt that it's at least 40 or 50 feet away from that neighboring house.
Is there any other place you could put that you think would be more appealing?
They need to be fairly close to the structure. It's possible we could perhaps put them out closer to the driveway out in here, which would be more toward the dead end of Rock Beach Road.
There's no houses around there, or?
It would be further away from the neighboring house. It is the end of Rock Beach Road. It would be further away from any house than where we are currently. It's possible we could put them there.
Wouldn't that put them visible on the facade of the house?
It's also gonna
It would be
create,
certainly more visible from the street, yes.
Gonna create another problem.
And this is code compliant with the setback, right? On the side?
Yes.
And you're calling for the shrubs to remain as possible, so I guess my suggestion would be that to leave them where they are, and if the shrubs can remain, then the shrubs can stay, and if there's something that damages those shrubs in the construction process, then we just ask them to be replaced.
We would be fine with that, and we intend to plant along that line.
Because if it's compliant in the setback, and it has
And you
screening.
also made an offer, though, to screen, correct?
We would be happy to do that if it would make people feel better, I think.
and also just at least as the drawing scales, it is 50 feet from the property line to,
No,
the neighboring house.
I would comfortably say 50 feet from the condensing units.
Right, well, I just scaled off your drawing.
Okay.
Using a scale.
Perfect.
And it's 50 feet from the property line to the wall of their house, and then it's 13 or 12 feet from the property line back to the condenser. So,
Correct.
I mean, we are talking about
65.
conservatively 50 to 60 feet.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
Do you want to address any of the other concerns that were brought up?
I don't want to take the risk of speaking out of school. I do think that perhaps the parking area you were mentioning, is that the existing paved?
You got to address your questions this way, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. My belief is that the parking where the lawnmower people were parking and it was a concern, I believe may be this little paved area here, which is the old driveway into the house that used to exist on this parcel. And there is a small easement across this neighbor's property in that location. I believe it is my client's intent to relieve that easement and remove this paved area. And you can see it's not in our final drawings, which should eliminate any erroneous parking from anyone really, yard staff or whoever it may be. So I believe that problem will be resolved. The height blocking the neighbor's view from that perspective, it certainly blocks the neighbor's view of the existing houses to the east, but it will not block their view to the lake in any way. Perhaps maybe from the side on a skewed angle, but not in any substantial manner. I don't think I have anything else to speak to on those questions.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Somebody like to make a seeker determination? Oh, sorry. Did you have to take us through the,
No seeker is required for this one. It's a type 2 action.
Type 2.
Yes. So seeker has been resolved and addressed.
thank you for taking care of that, Carrie. Anybody like to make a motion?
Sure. Alright, I'd like to take a shot at it.
You want to talk about some possible conditions first?
I have 3 listed.
Okay.
Do we want to just kick them around first?
Well, why don't you start it and then we'll get to the conditions?
Okay,
Or
alright.
do you want to kick around the you think there's
Go ahead and do that.
questions?
Why don't I just make it and we'll modify it if necessary?
Seeker and then the,
Yeah, so seeker's type 2, right? So
Right.
we're all set on seeker. Okay, great.
Right.
All right. Is this even the correct?
On the case of
No,
PB
it's not.
20.
All right. Yep. So on PB 2020-02-1, I would like to offer the motion that we approve the application with the following conditions. that the zoning variances, if required, are obtained. That the town engineer review and approve the distance from the crown of the steep slope.
Okay.
And that if the existing bushes along the west property line are not salvaged during construction, new bushes shall be installed to screen the condensers and generator.
Can I just suggest that we just say that the condensers be screened?
Yeah.
I don't care if the bushes stay alive or
Sure.
don't
Yep,
stay
I'm-
alive, that
yep.
they just, the end result is what we
They're
get.
screened. Yep. I'm fine with that.
All right, and then how about, providing the erosion and drainage control? I know that will be
Yeah,
a
that'll
town
be, that's
function.
required for building permit, is it not? Or do we need to specifically?
Or do we need
For,
to add this?
we can, that would be a product of the building requirement. If you want to condition it, you certainly can, because this
Sure.
doesn't, this won't rise to the level of requiring a SWIP.
SWIP, right, all right, so let's add that, a condition that, stormwater pollution prevention or stormwater, erosion control. that's what I'm
Erosion
looking
control and
for.
drainage.
Erosion control be provided and approved by staff during building permit.
And honestly, that'll be something that we have the town engineer take a
Engineer will
look at
review, right.
as part of their review of the building plans.
So approved by staff or town engineer?
You need to have it be by the town engineer. It'll be included, we'll ask that it'll be included as part of their, construction documents.
Okay, so I have 4 conditions, is that correct?
Yep.
All right, do I have a second?
Second,
All those approved, say aye.
aye.
Any opposed? None abstained, no absent. It passes 7-0. Next case, Michelle?
I'm sorry, sir. Next item on the agenda is a case number PB 1911-2. Upon the matter of request by Land Tech Planning and Surveying, acting as agent for Craig Restuccia for site plan approval to construct a new single-family dwelling on premises 301 Lakefront in an R1 residential district.
Before you start, Mr. Sharaba, I'm going to make a few comments. So, as a reminder, the town is holding a public hearing because there has been some modifications to the proposed layout of the site. In this zoning district, a single-family home is a permitted use by right. This board cannot decide if a home can be constructed on the site. Our review is limited to the terms outlined in 235-76. As the, we're going to get to this next part. There's been a lot of large amounts in comments and communications that this board has received on this proposed development. I'd like to ask our deputy town attorney to address the legal aspects of the application before the applicant starts. And one other comment is, all comments during this public hearing should be directed to this board. I just want to remind that of everybody, and only to this board, and within our, and basically state and think about before you come up, things that are discretionary decision within our power of the board. With that, could you please go over the legal aspects of this application?
Absolutely. So the main legal issue that I'm aware of is the existence of a easement walking path across the property. And I think it's important to remember that the board tonight is only deciding whether the site plan that's been presented by the applicant meets the criteria for site plan review under the code. That's the limit of the board's jurisdiction. The board does not have the jurisdiction to adjudicate any private property rights. And what I mean by that is the board is not in a position to tell the applicant or any neighbors whether an existing easement, private easement between two properties can be enforced, or the board's not in the position to tell the applicant or neighboring property owners whether those easements are in effect or how they can be enforced. So what the board has to do here today is decide whether the site plan that's presented meets the criteria under the code. And so I think you can take all of the information, all of the evidence that you have on the record and determine whether this site plan or this proposed site plan can be built. And to the extent the applicant's told you that they have the right to build on the property, and to the extent that you find that they do, then you can approve the site plan. But I don't think that the board should be determining whether a purported easement is enforceable, because the applicant here has stated that they have the right to build on the property. And the other thing I think it's worth mentioning is the applicant builds or the applicant goes forward with this project at their own risk. So if they don't in fact have the right to build what they've proposed here today, if there's a private easement, the beneficiary of that easement can enforce that easement, and they won't be able to construct the project, and potentially they won't be able to build obtain a building permit. But that's not this board's issue to decide. But so that's the main legal issue that I'm aware of. But if you have any other questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
And I'm so sorry, Chairman. I understand everybody's, and it's a packed house, and I appreciate everybody being here. Our microphones are very sensitive. This is being recorded for the purposes of being a record of the meeting. It's really important for the audience to keep conversation and commentary down. Otherwise, our board members can't hear the communication that they need to hear, and the recording becomes garbled, and I get messages from the folks downstairs letting me know that they can't hear. So I appreciate everybody's cooperation with that. Thank you.
If you do feel you have a need to talk, please take it out to the hallway so it won't interfere with the meeting. With that, Mr. Sharaba, please.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is John Sharaba with Land Tech, representing Craig Restucia, who is here this evening. Also, Dan Mastrella, that is his counsel, that could probably speak more accurately to some of the issues that the town's council arose regarding the easements. I know the board's familiar with this property, but I'll just go over quickly what we're looking at. This parcel is located at the west end of West Avenue. It's near the end of St. Paul Boulevard. It's 1.7 acres in size. It is zoned R1, and we also have a lakefront development district, overlay district on this property, and that's why we're here this evening. What we're proposing is a single-family house. This house is set back 57 feet roughly from the right-of-way. It's 53 feet from the east property line, about 82 feet from the west property line. There are some factors that inhibit development. One of that is the Beatty Beach easement. That is clearly shown on our plan. I can go to that board here. So there's a 150-foot wide easement. I know the board's familiar with it. That is represented by these red lines. The property lines are shown here. So our property line, and this is our east property line, which is basically the Washington Street extension. As I said, the house is set back about 57 feet from the right-of-way at Beach Avenue, 50 feet from this property line, 82 feet from this property line. We have access to public sewer, water, and storm sewer is available right at the site. Obviously, the lake is right here. There are a couple environmental factors that affect this site, which we're not impacting. One is that you heard before this evening, which is the structural hazard zone. That line is represented right here. We're 65 feet away from that line, so we're nowhere near close to that. The other is the floodplain. That is represented by this squiggly line that goes through here. That floodplain is established at elevation 250 in this area along Lake Ontario. The existing grade where we're proposing our house is at 257, so we're basically 7 feet above the floodplain. The proposed first floor elevation of the proposed house is at elevation 258. So we are 8 feet above the floodplain. The structure is not proposed with any basement, so we're not inhibiting any of the issues related to floodplain or paying flood insurance with this structure. The site is generally flat. It slopes from Washington Avenue to the lake. Stormwater management is very non-existent. We have a small storm sewer that will catch the roof leaders and take stormwater from the house directly north, so it doesn't impact any of the properties to the east or the west. Stormwater management is really not significant with this project. We're less than an acre of disturbance that would require a permit from the DEC. As I said, the site's only 1.7 acres, so we're really about half acre of disturbance. The issues that we're also showing is a two-way or one-way access road. This is where the driveway would come in here and loop through. This is done because this is a one-way road. With a change in grade, the residents can come in from this side and drop out and then access out to St. Paul Boulevard. One of the easements outside the Beatrice Beach easement was talked about was a walking trail that was here. There's also some power lines. This plan includes taking the power lines and putting them underground to improve the view in the area. The trail easement that goes through here, we've worked closely with Department of Public Works to modify the location of that trail. So the plan shows we're proposing is a 10-foot permanent easement to the town that'll run along the right-of-way of Beach Avenue, then go along our west property line and connect back to the trail where it is. In conjunction with that, we're proposing a 5-foot sidewalk running along Beach Avenue. This will be constructed per Town of Arundecoit standards, and it'll be to the cost of Mr. Restuccia to install that. One of the issues that came up during the workshop is how tall is this structure? Wanted some clarification on that and where we fall. Going back to what we were looking at before was in R1 code, the maximum height of a house is 24 feet from grade, but that's the average between the peak and the eave. So our average is 18.5 feet high, which is 5.5 feet lower than code, so we do not need code. Going back to what Kerry described, section 235-36C3, where it requires the ceiling height to be 25 feet, we will also meet that code. So we're not proposing to have a ceiling going all the way to the peak, so it'll be a lower ceiling on the second floor, so we don't see a problem with that. As I said, no area variances are required with the construction of this house. No permits are required by the DEC, Army Corps, and this is not in an EPOD of the town of Arundecoit. As previously stated, we are not proposing to limit access to the beach. We know that people have rights to the Beatrice Beach easement, which is 150 feet wide. We also know that the Washington extension extends to the lake. Mr. Restuccia understands this clearly, is not trying to limit access to anybody to use the beach as they're allowed to lawfully. But he does want to live here. He understands there'll be a lot of people walking around. But I think these are the changes that I've went over quickly based on the workshop we had, and I can address any questions you have at this time.
Mr. Elam, do you have any questions?
I do. One is for the town attorney. You said we don't have any, this is being presented to us, and this is just a clarification question. This is being presented to us as he has the right to build here, correct? And I don't doubt that. And that we can enforce a private easement. Is that east-west easement a private easement or a public easement?
So it appears to me to be a private easement, but what I will say is that we have not, examined the title for this property. It's not the town's responsibility to do that. And my understanding is that the applicant is representing that it's a private easement and that it does not impact their ability to build on the property. That's my understanding, but I actually think that the board should make a determination on that fact based on what's on the record, what you've heard so far.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Hedging a little bit, but.
Well, yeah. So we've talked at length about moving an easement, but really, if that's a private easement, what they're doing is deeding an easement, a brand new easement to the town. We aren't moving anything.
That's fair. Yeah, it's almost like
okay.
it's
That's all right. That's what I'm. The other question is, actually for you, John. You mentioned the second floor. I was under the understanding this was a single floor home.
It is.
Okay.
So I was speaking to the information we learned tonight about this, the ceiling height of the second floor of the structure has to be 25 feet or less.
I see.
And we are under that code.
All right. Okay. That's what I have for questions right now.
I'm hoping that maybe the applicant's attorney would love to talk a little more about the
I'm sure I'd like to get out of the spotlight.
east-west.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, staff, members of the board. My name is Daniel Mastrella. I'm an attorney with an office at 45 Exchange Boulevard in Rochester. I represent Mr. Restuccia, the applicant, here tonight. And yes, I would like to address the easement issue, which seems to now be the burning issue in this application. When Mr. Restuccia first proposed to build a home on this property, the town of Arundecoit asserted that it had an easement, this walking easement across the property, the easement that we are discussing, and that in its its ability to protect the interests of the town, that we would have to build outside of that easement. And the first plan that was brought before you did exactly that. It placed the house just north of the easement so that nothing was obstructing that easement. And the department, the Commissioner of Public Works, approved that plan and said he had no problem with it. However, a number of nearby residents did have a problem with it. They felt that the location of the home was going to obstruct some views of some other lakefront residents, and they wanted us to adjust that. We looked into the issue of the easement. The easement is actually a 1908 easement from Mr. Restuccia's predecessors in title to the Rochester and Suburban Railway Company for use of the railway and its patrons and pedestrians in connection with the business of the railway. The railway was dissolved in 1939. The easement, as far as we can tell, looking at our chain of title, discussing it with our title company, and requesting anything that the town may have on this, was never assigned to anyone. So I think that the town has now backed off in its assertion that it has an easement to protect across the property. With that in mind, we discussed with staff, with the Commissioner of Public Works, the possibility of actually establishing an easement and making this project the best project it could be by putting a permanent sidewalk easement and actually constructing a sidewalk at the south end of the property, adjacent to the roadway, a sidewalk that would be acceptable and meet town specifications and would actually meet the requirements of the Americans with Disabilities Act, which of course a pathway across the property does not. And because the town had initially asserted that it believed that it had an interest in the railway easement, we asked them if in exchange for the easement across the front of the property and building a sidewalk and giving people access along that sidewalk, if they would abandon any interest they may have, if they have any, in the easement, the railway easement from 1908. And the Commissioner of Public Works said yes and agreed to that, which is now the genesis of the current plan that's in front of you. This has allowed us to do a number of things to actually enhance further the project that was proposed. The house is now located somewhat south of where it was originally proposed because we're not adhering to the easement. The sidewalk will be constructed. The telephone poles will be removed and the lines placed underground to enhance visibility for anybody in that area. It is the best project as proposed that we can propose. It's significantly more costly for Mr. Restuccia. It also, and there have been a number of rumblings, the board has received emails that, that the residents believe that they have an easement there, and that is, they're certainly entitled to that belief, and they are certainly entitled to challenge in court Mr. Restuccia's current plan if it's approved. But, you know, the caveat to that is that, first of all, it's costly. But beyond it being costly, it's a very major hurdle. It's a high standard for the residents to establish that they have an easement that they have no title to. And even if they were to prevail, it would just go back to the original plan outside the easement, which just isn't as good a plan as what is now proposed. So in summary, initially we proposed, we located the house outside that easement to appease the town. We didn't want to argue with the town over whether or not they had an easement. And now that they've agreed to abandon whatever interest they may have in exchange for this new easement, that removes that problem. This is at the applicant's own risk. The residents can assert that they have an easement, that they have a right. But once again, even if they were to prevail, it's going to get them a worse plan, you know, at the end of the day. So, if there's any questions I can answer regarding this this easement, I'll be glad to.
So I just want to follow up and maybe ask this in a very point blank matter.
Mm-hmm.
Is it your stance that there is no walking path easement other than what the town's interest may have been, which the DPW director and so have agreed to abandon?
It is, because that easement was specific to the railway, its patrons, and pedestrians in connection with the business of the railway. That easement died in 1939 when it was dissolved. And you know, this property, this specific property, has been the subject of two rather large lawsuits back in the 80s, a 1983 and 1985 decision. The easement was never an issue in those decisions. We're certainly respecting thoroughly the Beatry Beach easement, the town's Washington Street extension, which gives residents perfect access right to the lakefront, and trying to propose to this board the best project we can propose, and at greater expense and somewhat greater risk to the applicant.
I have a question. So I understand the railroad component of this, but I also, there's a street address that's somehow tied to this somehow. Is there or is there not? Because the address of the property is 301 Lakefront, right? And it's off of Beach Avenue. So how does the town must think something exists in some way, shape, or form in order to justify the 301 Lakefront address? Or
I think that the town assigned that address. I mean, you know, ultimately, on a vacant parcel, there usually isn't an address until something's built on it, and you go through the process, and the post office actually assigns the address. But, you know, we've had discussions with the town. I mean, the town back in early November asserted the position that it had the easement, and in further discussions with Mr. Kiley, nobody's been able to establish that the town has any easement, and in light of the plan that is now proposed, whatever interest the town may have in that railroad easement, they are willing to surrender, leaving the potential of a private easement, which, as the deputy town attorney has indicated, you're not supposed to let enter into your decision-making process.
Can I ask you one question about this sidewalk, and it has to do with the ADA compliance? I understand that the ADA compliant would go with the paved or the concrete area that is the furthest south that you're allowing for the easement. I'm most interested in the conductivity between what is currently a private easement or a public easement that's going east-west to back down to that sidewalk on the south, what would be running north to south. Does that need to be ADA compliant, or should we just disregard that conductivity between the easement walkway and the area between that and the paved sidewalk, if that makes sense?
I'm not sure I'm following you, but, you know, we can only do on Mr. Restuccia's property what we can do. We can't do anything off of the property. That's more of a town interest in obtaining easements and providing connectivity.
It's the ADA compliance that I'm asking. In your opinion, is that a private easement again going south from the walkway down to what is going to be deeded as a new easement to the town?
No, it's not a private easement. It's just not interfering with the existing private easement. You know, that's not necessarily exclusive, that private easement. It just can't be interfered with. It can't be blocked. No barriers can be erected, and certainly the creation of a sidewalk is not the erection of a barrier or interference.
Right, we are talking about two different things. Does the east-west easement that currently exists, what's on the applicant's property, you're going to deed down to the south or trade down to the south, right?
Well, you know, we're of the position that there is no east-west easement, but...
And that's fine.
But
Here's my question.
We're giving an easement.
Here's my real
on the
question.
south. Go ahead.
We've got this part of the easement until it gets up to the applicant's property, and then it's going to shift down. My question is, does this little shift, the conductivity here, need to be ADA compliant, just as the sidewalk does?
Okay, I'll let Mr. Sharada step in.
I mean,
So I believe
based on, just one second, John, if I can. Based on what council is, the applicant's council is stating, there is no easement here, so there's nothing to have connectivity to. They're creating a new section of sidewalk along the road, which will be ADA compliant, and there is nothing for it to conduct to.
So there'd be no conductivity between that and the current walkway?
There's a proposed mulch path
That's what I'm asking
Yeah, there's two
about.
areas I think that you're thinking about. Our east property line, which is the Washington Street extension, that's currently a grass area.
Yeah, that
That's
you're
going
not
to stay
really
remain the
touching,
same. On our west property line, we're extending that 10-foot easement along our west property line to the reputed easement that heads further west. And on that area, we show proposed mulch trail, because we do want to promote
My
people.
question is, does that mulch trail need
No,
to
it's
be
not.
ADA
No.
compliant?
No, Mr. Kiley does not want to take care of anything, facilities that are going further north than we propose on our plan.
Gonna call that private and,
We're going to call it a mulch trail. It's going to be within a town of Arundequoit easement.
all right. Okay. John, a question for you. Can you tell me what the setback is on this house again?
Need the- I think I might have it in my notes.
From the south line of the property?
55.6 feet.
And what would be the adjacent property?
To the way to the west,
Yeah,
I think that's 57 feet.
okay, so they're comparable in setback.
Yep.
Got it, thank you. And one last thing, I guess we were a little concerned about lighting, that we weren't getting a lot of spillover and a lot of bright lighting that would actually interfere with the view at night.
All
have
lighting's
anything?
proposed is residential at this time. We're not proposing any major floodlights or anything like this at this time, but we're not proposing street lights,
Okay,
anything like that. There is a street light right at the curve,
yep,
right where the
That's
driveway entrance is
existing,
proposed.
yeah.
Yeah.
thank you.
I don't have any questions, Mr. Palermo.
No, thanks for helping.
I'm all set.
Have you considered connecting the sidewalk to the stub on St. Paul?
I know that's been a point of discussion, and we really want to just work within our own property. Mr. Kiley's been great to work with, and if during construction he wants us to install that portion in the town right away, we'll work with him on that. But at this point, we just want to really work within the confines of our property.
And I have a question for staff. They are saying that the town might have taken a position on whether or not that is a public easement, and what is the town's position?
So, I can share with you that the Commissioner of Public Works and you can look at the notice that was sent. There was an original, memo that was sent on and stamped in and received as January 27th to the planning board, which also included the letter that was submitted to the applicant's representative on December 6th. So the Commissioner of Public Works maintains that the preferred alternative is to keep the existing easement where it is located as it was originally presented and not have to relocate anything. They indicated that he would be amenable to accepting an easement to establish sidewalk along Beach Avenue and create a connection point. The town hasn't, as the deputy town attorney has indicated, hasn't conducted a title search on this particular matter. It was noted on the survey that was submitted to the town, and on the survey it's noted as a pedestrian easement, and I believe it says to the town. One of the iterations of the surveys that were reviewed prior to or during early stages of application. So the town's position of it being an easement to the town is that the survey instrument map made mention of that. And so the town, we did some research to try to locate a easement filed to the town. And I will say it was not an exhaustive search. Again, it wasn't a title search on property, but we didn't locate one in our records or archive records. And unfortunately, because of how long the property has been in existence, we would need.
I ask that because that seems to be an important question. If it is a private easement, then if it is a public easement, then we would have a lot to say about that, I would assume.
Yeah. So if there is a public interest or the town has any interest in that existing easement that would need to be abandoned in order to at the applicant's request and then accepting a new easement, the abandonment of the interest would be subject to board approval, town board approval. And I believe, and I'll double check with the Commissioner of Public Works, but I believe even the dedication of a new easement would be subject to town board approval as well.
So,
Just to add on, if I may, like Carrie said, we didn't do a full title review, but the title documents that I have reviewed are consistent with what the applicant's counsel said, that there was basically what I saw was a restriction in a deed that contained an easement to I believe a railroad company. It was pretty old. There's no evidence that necessarily that it's been abandoned, but there's definitely no evidence that it's still being enforced. And I also would add that even if there were a public easement, an easement to the town, the applicant still moves forward with this project at their own risk, and the town could still enforce, even with a site plan approval, this town could still enforce its own easement against the property owner and say you can't, despite what this board has approved, you can't build, you can't, block our public easement. So again, they're doing this at their own risk. If they've made a mistake and there is a defect in their title, that's going to be their problem, but it's not this board's jurisdiction to sort of make that determination.
I just have a concern that if the sidewalk easement is determined to be private, and then we create this public easement that sort of horseshoes around this property and leads to private easements, that seems foolish. Right, to
Did you
do
restate
that.
that again? I'm sorry, Bradley. You said the
So
sidewalk.
if the big if the sidewalk easement is in fact private, but then we go through and try to create these public easements that are sort of a horseshoe around the property, connecting a private easement, public easement, and then back to a private. I mean, that seems silly.
Brad,
So
we being who?
the planning board. Well, I don't know. I suppose the town board would have to eventually finish the job.
Correct. So I think when you're looking at the application, it's really in the as presented, and the going back to the main focus of the waterfront regulations is to look at those areas. So you want to I think the issue of connectivity and public easements is actually going to be something that is taken up by the Commissioner of Public Works, and to the extent that those decisions require town board approval, those would need to be sought prior to any acceptance of easements or filing of easements that are being granted to the town.
I find it difficult to know exactly what the best plan forward is if we're not sure if it's a public or a private easement.
What we're hearing from council is that they are not in knowledge of any easement. So that's what I think we have, at least at the moment, to discuss and talk about. So I think what we're looking at on paper here to have a new sidewalk along the road is what we promote on any project, which normally we're not looking at residential projects, but any project that we look at where we're trying to get sidewalks anytime we can. So with that in mind, I think it makes perfect sense to be looking at the sidewalk out by the street. There's no connectivity in any way proposed on the east property line, so your horseshoe connection, I think, goes away there. And on the west property line, where the mulch path is shown, is within that Beatree Beach easement. So if nothing else, it is at least providing a way into the Beatree Beach easement. If in fact there is no private easement running east and west, it is at least a path for people to get into their access on that Beatree Beach easement.
If it were to connect to the stub on St. Paul.
Agreed, and I think a recommendation needs to be put forth on that, but we saw a public
John, did you say the proposed mulch path, I'm gonna call it that, because this is my plan here, the north-south, you're gonna include that in an easement to the town? That will
Yes,
not
it
be
is.
private property?
They will not be, it will be within a town easement.
So this new quote-unquote town easement that we're talking about here runs east-west along Beach Avenue, and then it will turn north and head up, you know, whatever that is, 80 feet,
Yeah.
100 feet up the west property line.
I-
That will, that mulch path is gonna belong to the town.
Yeah, but it's gonna be alongside, right, almost directly alongside an
And
existing.
as a clarification, it's gonna be an easement over private property.
Sorry, it will be an easement over private
you.
property.
And that's within the Monroe County Storms Water easement, so it's basically right on top of the pipe that runs to the lake. So it's an easement on top of another easement.
So it's not the line, the easement line?
It's within it, it's lightly colored on your plan, it's 10 feet off the property line, 10 feet east of the west property line.
Okay, you're right, it's but a bit further away from, yeah.
The pipe,
got it.
yeah.
So, but it is a horseshoe shaped proposal, because there's another one on the other side, right? That runs. No.
No, there's nothing on the Washington Avenue extension. There's existing highway lines and right-of-ways, but we're not proposing any easement within that. I guess what we're really showing with that mulch trail is Mr. Restucci is not trying to negatively impact people using that Beatrice Beach easement. He understands it fully, and bringing people there.
So, and that I just want to clarify this for myself one more time. That north-south stone mulch trail does not have to be ADA compliant, even though it's an easement to the town.
I don't believe so.
Okay.
It's not in a public right-of-way.
Yeah, I mean, the town can have easements that have no
Right, I just want to
Nothing
make
else,
sure.
obstruction of any sort.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Bernie, we've got a public hearing.
Yeah. Any other questions for the applicant? Anything else?
Finish the motion.
Huh? No, so with that, you can have a seat at this time. I'm gonna open up the public hearing. I just want to remind everybody, there's a 5-minute limit. In addition, please make sure that was a quick 5 minutes for me.
Wow. That's very
Please.
official.
Please address all your comments to the board and only the board, and please keep any other noises down as we're doing this public hearing. Don't comment on the comments made and so forth. But all the speakers, please address the board. Please state your name and address. Public hearing's open.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. My name is Douglas Knipple. I live at 44 Madison Terrace, and I have a deed that has a prescriptive easement that's been in existence for 150 years. It's a permanent legal right to use a particular area of property. And that's what I want to discuss here today. And I'm going to take exception to some opinions that were expressed that I think confuse the legal issue. I have in front of me here a judgment of the New York State Supreme Court Appellate Division, 4th Department, Williamson versus Salmon, and this judgment was rendered February 28, 1918, and I'll be happy to give a copy of this to the board. I want to read a couple of salient points that address some of the issues and opinions that have been rendered with regard to this prescriptive easement. In this judgment, the plaintiff, Martin Williamson, by virtue of his deed, is entitled to an easement in and over the whole of the strip of land 150 feet wide for the full length and width thereof as depicted on the map. And I am referring to the property in question here. And that he's entitled to the unobstructed use of the whole of said strip as an open appurtenant to lot number 43 on Washington, leading to Lake Ontario, said strip being 150 feet wide throughout from Beach Avenue to Lake Ontario. And the defendant, Mr. Salmon, has no right to put up or maintain obstructions interfering in any way with such free use by the plaintiff of the whole of said strip 150 feet wide through as an open way to said lakeshore. The defendant has no right, furthermore, to maintain any obstructions in any part of said Beach Avenue interfering with such use as against this plaintiff or his successors in interest. Further on, defendant will not erect any building or other structure upon said property owned by him and herein before described to the northward of said lot, Lot 1 that is, or said Lot 45 so as to obstruct the view of said lake from the said lots or either of them. This covenant shall run with the land, that is, it's tied to deeds. I have a deed, a typical deed from Washington Avenue says, with the premises hereby conveyed is also conveyed the right and privilege with all others who own or may own lots in the Beetree Beach tract of using that part of the beach of Lake Ontario that is included in the deed from Tone to Salmon, the defendant in this case, recorded in the Monroe County Clerk's Office in Lieber 449 of Deeds, page 111 for private boating and bathing purposes. I have a similar covenant in my deed for prescriptive easements to access the lake. One of the reasons I bought the property at 44 Madison Terrace was because I had relative ease of use of the lakefront. And it seems like every time some obnoxious lakefront property owner comes along and wants to build an obstruction, we are either going to have to lawyer up or depend on you folks, which we don't have a lot of confidence in, to do the right thing.
Please keep the comments down, please. We're not going to be able to keep doing that, please.
One further exhibit attached to this decision is Lieber 550 Deeds, page 458. This refers to the original agreement between the property owners of Somerville with whom the railroad entered into an agreement on June 5th, 1893. The salient parts here that I won't repeat previous content is the new walk which has been constructed by the landowners near the beach, that's referring to this 150 foot wide easement, shall be maintained by by them, referring to the landowners near the beach, in its present location. And I emphasize in its present location and severally. It shall be maintained by them severally in its present location, which is to say the walk cannot be removed. And it's not a town easement, it's a private easement
Excuse me,
between
sir.
property owners.
I apologize. Your time is up.
I have one further sentence, if I might finish. All the parties hereto mutually covenant and agree that no driveway of any kind shall be constructed, maintained, or used on said beach.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you for hearing me.
Hi, I'm Diane White. My address is 873 Washington Avenue, Rochester, New York. Lot number 2, the Beetree Beach tract, dating all the way back to the 1800s. There is an agreement between the property owners of Somerville, including the predecessor that owned my property, dated June 5th, 1893. Liber 550 Deeds, page 458. This covenant will run with the land. There was money exchanged by the property owners to the railroad that gave the railroad the ability to build a sidewalk. They asked for them to build it, they paid for it to be built, and it was built. It wasn't built just for a railroad. It was built specifically as a boulevard to be used to be walking up and down the lake. This is an integral part of the history of Irondequoit, particularly down by the lake, and we have petitioned to have it claimed to be, to certify it as a historical site with the state of New York. So this is very important. This isn't just some little easement. This is a covenant that we paid for, that our predecessors that owned this property before us paid for, and it's in our deed. And it clearly states, and this is after 1908, this is in the case that was cited by my predecessor, Williamson versus Selman dated 1918, they cite specifically to this as Exhibit 14, the agreement of the property owners that I just cited, that this runs with the land. That means that this is in our deeds. So anyone or any attorney who claimed that they couldn't find anything or that something referred to something was just with the railroad, they were completely incorrect. And why is it so important to us? Because we are the property owners, and so we have done those title searches. With respect to the ability to move that, well, the Commissioner of Public Works was absolutely right. Keep it where it is. There's no reason for anybody to get into litigation. Keep it where it is. The other point that I definitely want to make, because I know that I only have 5 minutes and you know I tend to talk a lot and write a lot of emails, is with respect to SECRA. The application presents several potential negative environmental impacts. Number one is the controversy. We have over 700 people who have opposed this building, and I've mentioned to you the reasons why in various different emails to you. But in addition to that, there's environmental impacts with respect to the dumping of property, or excuse me, of construction materials between the period of 2002 to 2019, which has elevated and the area that Mr. Restusha intends to build on, and that has a negative impact not only on the topography, causing potential runoff, but also on the contamination in the soil and the potential of that contamination running into the lake. In addition to that, where he is proposing to build his house, in addition to the fact that he's sitting on property he doesn't own or has a right to give away, he also, his house is farther north than any of the other houses that are on lakefront. Lakefront is on your zoning, it's on your zoning map, it's on maps dating all the way back in the history of Lake Ontario. The reason that he has the address Lakefront is because Lakefront is actually listed as a potential, or excuse me, as an actual sidewalk. It's designated as a sidewalk on these, all of your sheets here. So that's why Lakefront comes into play. And all of the houses along that are set back to the south from that line. So that's important. So that goes to community character, which is part number 2 of SECRA, and the house is sitting too far to the north, and that creates a potential major negative impact. And number 3, and probably one of the most important to us, is the potential of this sidewalk. First of all, as I stated before, the town has absolutely no right to be moving, nor does Mr. Restusha, to give away anything with respect to that sidewalk. And with respect to a new sidewalk that you propose to put there, well, be careful about that, because we want to know who's going to be liable when the little kids get hit, when they're walking along that sidewalk and they go around that sidewalk and there's a blind curve. And I've almost been hit at least 3 times. In fact, making a video for the town, I was almost hit by a truck. And I want to know who's going to be liable for that when you build a sidewalk there, regardless of whether Mr. Restusha gets to build his house or not. You propose to put a sidewalk on that side of the street. I want to know who's going to be liable for it. I went to the workshop, and here's an interesting point that probably a lot of you don't know. Somebody said on that, well, we don't even know if the Department of Public Works is going to end up maintaining it. They're under no liability, no obligation to maintain it. Mr. Restusha is going to build it, right? But who's going to maintain it? Who's going to be liable for it when some little kid gets hit, or when that thing decays to the point where it becomes dangerous? Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Please, I have to ask you, if you can't refrain from doing that, please go into the hallway and come back when you can. Thank you.
If I could just ask those people making comments, if when they're talking about easements, they could be really clear about if they're talking about the Beatree Beach easement or the sidewalk easement, because it's easy to get them confused, and it's an important part.
Hi, I'm Rebecca Rogers. I live at 842 Washington Avenue. I'm 3/4 of the way down of the Washington, the extension. I'm here as a mother and a grandmother. I take my children, I cross the road, I walk down the sidewalk. If I want to take them to the tot lot on Bateau, I go to the access that we have for the beach rights. I make a right and I take the path to Bateau tot lot for my grandchildren. No vehicles, no cars, we're safe, we're off the road. All right, if I want to take them to Wisdom Park, I walk down the sidewalk on Washington, I make a left, I walk on my neighbor's lawn because it's on the left side of the road, like she said. It's a blind view. Now, I've lived there 32 years. I've seen people though they don't know, that curve, I've seen them hit the guardrail that's down there. So I walk my grandchildren on the grass on my neighbor's lawn to take them to the Windsor Park down on St. Paul Boulevard. He's taking these lights he want to move on this access. I mean, we walk across that easement from Washington to Beatrice. He wants to move the sidewalk out, okay? Like you said, a horseshoe. Now I'm exposing me and my grandchildren on a sidewalk that cars that come flying down. Because if you're coming from Lakeshore Boulevard, you make the right on Washington, they use Washington as a cut-through to go down to the pubs or the fishing access. You're coming from the Charlotte side, you're coming down St. Paul. He made a driveway that is accessible from basically St. Paul and Washington. Now, I've seen people drive off of St. Paul into his driveway, into his driveway he made, okay, and they leave, say, up Washington Extension. That's a one-way. Okay, we got to deal with this now. Now he's talking, he wants to move, it's either or the way. Well, all I'm saying is, I don't want my grandchildren exposed to the traffic, the blind traffic that people use during the summer, even in the winter. It's not safe. And those lights that he wants to take down and the wires he wants to bury, those lights are the only lights that show somebody that's not from down there, there's a curb. You don't turn left quick. You're in a lake. Or maybe his garage. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker, please.
My name is Tim Sengel, representing Doris Sengel, my mother, 82 Wabash Avenue. I have power of attorney. Mr. Mistrella quoted the Commissioner of Public Works indicating that it was okay to build forward of the sidewalk. I have a letter here dated January 24th to Carrie Ivers. The Department of Public Works does not recommend and is not interested in the construction or maintenance of a sidewalk positioned this close to Lake Ontario. From the permitting required for construction with proximity to wetlands and shoreline, construction issues to likelihood of future flooding events, the above concept is not appropriate. In light of the above, the concept for construction north of the proposed house should be abandoned. Please refer to the attached letter for guidance of two additional concepts, which is the horseshoe thing that you're discussing. I have discovered two deeds, the original deed from Mr. Salmon for this property and a false deed from Mr. Long to Mr. Newheimer to Mr. Restucci, who purchased the property in good faith. You're using the dimensions of a false deed to approve this property. Mr. Long, in an effort to sell the property, moved the lot line, the east lot line, to the center of Washington Avenue. No other property is using that dimension. We have copies of both deeds, the original and the false deed. I would suggest that the site plan be abandoned at this time and then resubmitted. No permits were acquired for the driveway, for the environmental protection zone, or for dumping stone and fill there. You won't be able to sell this property if you have a false deed. So you can build anything you want on it, $1 million, $2 million, but the time comes to sell it at some time in the future, it's going to be challenged, and I don't know what the outcome of that would be. We have also from Mr. Salmon to Mr. Minnick to Mr. McChase, that whereas the party of the first part, the owner of certain lands, agrees with the party of the second part and the third part, that nothing shall be built on this property to erect any building or other structure upon said property owned by him and therefore described to northward of Lot 1 or Lot 45 so as to obstruct the view of the lake from lots either of them or any part thereof, unless and at least two of the parties agree to this. Mr. Long is dead, Mr. Salmon is dead. The only thing we have to use is the deeds that are filed in Monroe County. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Dan Driffel. I live at 816 Washington Avenue with my wife Rosemary. We're about 10 houses from the proposed house at 301 Lakefront. I am a lifelong resident of Irondequoit and proud of it. We have a great town. There are currently over 700 current and former residents that signed a petition on change.org that are against this proposed development. As a planning board, you represent all the residents and the town's best interests for proposed developments. This path and sidewalk that is being potentially impacted have been enjoyed by generations of residents since the 1800s. That's a long time and a lot of history. The ability to walk that lakefront and see the beauty of the Great Lake Ontario with unobstructed views is enjoyed by many residents daily and year-round, not just summer. I personally walk my dog 5 to 7 days a week, right through that path. No other lakefront address has been allowed to develop north of the sidewalk/path. In fact, there are court precedents that I'm sure you're all aware of that prevent that. Moving this sidewalk to the south to Beach, Washington is an extremely dangerous and a bad idea. It's on a curve on a one-way street. This will put children and adults at risk for an accident, and as Diane mentioned, who's going to assume the liability of the injuries? That's a significant decision that needs to be made. The land that is being proposed for development, as you've been made aware of, has been raised with unknown materials, and no one seems to know if a permit was obtained and if the materials that were dumped there to raise the land were inspected and approved for dumping. There's speculation that the building materials from demolition of various projects that were dumped there. Lake Ontario is all of our drinking water source, and this should be looked into. The raising of this lot should be a primary concern for both of the neighbors to the east and the west, as they will experience runoff issues for years to come as a result of that. As I'm sure you're aware of, Mr. Restuccio put in a circular driveway with stone used from the Washington Avenue sewer project without a permit. If I put a driveway in without a permit, I'm sure somebody would be fining me. Mr. Restuccio continues to access that circular driveway by entering a one-way in the wrong direction at St. Paul Boulevard. It is this complete disregard for the rules and laws that is very concerning for many of us neighbors. I have a print from a previous proposal for this land, the Niehauer subdivision that was mentioned. No one can seem to find out why this was denied. Does the planning board have the ability to do research on previous submittals on properties? If so, I recommend you may do that, and this may help you with your decision. The charm and uniqueness of Somerville, and specifically the beach and lakefront, is truly one of a kind in the United States and arguably the world. It has been that way since the 1800s, when the railroad established rights to area for all residents to enjoy. I ask you, do you want to be remembered as a town planning board that changed this forever? I would not want that on my resume. This proposed plan is like nailing Jell-O to the wall. It keeps changing. Even between your workshop meetings and open meetings, we've all been here. There have been no architectural plans submitted to describe the building height, square footage, etc. The owner has stated 27 feet high, but no plans to demonstrate that. Could he build 27, 35, 50? Height should be a major concern for you as it is for us. Who knows what height it will be without detailed plans to review? How can you as a board possibly approve or even consider this proposal without those necessary details? It's like asking for carte blanche. Approve my footprint and I'll build whatever I want. And that seems to be the prevailing attitude. Due to the lack of these detailed plans and the other issues I have presented, we as concerned neighbors and residents respectfully request that you deny this proposal for a lack of detailed structural plans. We also request that you consider requiring the owner to obtain an approved environmental impact study due to the proximity of building near the lake and a drinking water source. And in conclusion, this is a private easement. There's been many of us residents, we have workshops privately. We have the documents, we have the proof. It is a private easement, and we will proceed with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Hi, my name is Tricia Carroll, and I live at 1136 Whitlock Road in Arundequite, and I am not their neighbor. I don't even know the gentleman that's going to build the house, but I would like to say that I think it's great that somebody is going to build a single-family home. Okay, we need more single-family homes in Arundequite. I understand what everybody is saying. We in the Whitlock, Carl Sam area have also said a lot of things about why we did not want a 3-story government subsidized building in our backyard. So, and I know this isn't the issue. I'm just trying to say that I promote single-family homes in Arundequite no matter what neighborhood they're in. So you could look at me funny all day long, but this is my thought.
Thank
And
you.
I'll end it there.
Thank you. Next person, please. It's okay to be in line if you'd like.
Good evening. My name is Barbara Clement, and I live at 543 Rock Beach. And tonight I came here with some questions, and some of them have been answered. But I'm concerned with the final page on your agenda here. I have this page with me. I'm sorry, it isn't on your agenda, which shows basically the lot. And it goes into the water, which I find fascinating, because in 1972, the New York State Trust Doctrine, based on Roman law, by the way, said that all navigable waterways in New York State belong to the people up to the high water level. And I don't understand how you can own water in the lake if New York State says that they own up to the high water mark. So if this is outlining the deed of the property, it's definitely wrong. And whatever is basing on this easement and all the things that's going on with the house would be markedly different if you based it from the shoreline rather than in the water. So that's something that needs to be looked at by the board. Another thing that you have to know about is also the New York State Trust Doctrine states that New York State law is across all shorelines and is based from the low to the high tide lines. So that's public access no matter what, according to New York State. The Adirondack Waterways Act from New York State also states as well, public will be able to walk it through all low tides and high tides. It's all public property. So I'm concerned myself because I have a tendency to walk my dog in that area. I realize he's said that there's the water line is coming back and they're aware of the high tides. But usually what happens with a property owner, they come in and say, oh yes, we're very good about this, we're gonna work with the attendants, and then all of a sudden no trespassing signs go up all over the place. I mean, I walk up and down the shoreline there by where the Bateau Beach is, and there's no trespassing signs all over the place. And they're on the high water mark. I mean, it isn't like it's back on their property. I mean, this is the flatlands where the DEC supposedly has the floodplain, and they've got all sorts of no trespassing signs. Well, the fact is they do have public access in their deeds, as well as a New York State resident, to be able to walk along that shoreline. And that shoreline, nobody can own the water, according to New York State or federal law. So how this gentleman's deed goes into the water, it just mind boggles me. And I really think that needs to be looked into because it will influence what goes on with the rest of that map. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Richard Barone, and I live at 154 Allwood Drive. Been a town resident for about 52 years. As my background, I sat on this board that you sit on right now for 14 years, 10 years as the chairman. I don't ever recall in those 14 years the town planning board approving anything over an easement that's been legally filed. Never. I think people realize they wouldn't even apply for it because they wouldn't get it. In the 79 years I've been alive, I learned one thing, among others: trust but verify. If the attorney tells you something that you have to do or don't do, get it in writing. I've dealt with at least 25 attorneys in my life, and there's at least a third of them that weren't quite right. They had half or three-quarters of the law right. They didn't have the whole law right. If you approve this site, and I don't suggest you should, like many planning boards and town boards in the past, I was a councilman also for 8 years doing rezoning in this town. A lot of them we turned down. Approve it contingent. How dare you consider building something on someone else's legal rights? Unless you can show in writing, written by the attorney, chapter and verse of the law or the town code, if it's legal, then I don't think you should do that. Another issue that I learned over the years, having been a landlord for 25 years. There's a legal issue called encroachment by use. There's other terms for it, but that's what I've been told, one of the explanations of it. Encroachment by use. Even though there's no easement, if I start using my neighbor's property, bringing a boat down there, walking it, walking my dog, parking my car on his land for a certain number of years, there used to be in the law, I now have a permanent right to that easement. So if these people had been using that property for a particular number of years, I believe, they have a right to use it. It doesn't matter if the railroad's no longer there. It doesn't have to be in writing. It's just through the use. Now, how do you prove that? You prove that with testimony, I would imagine, and other types of evidence. So that's another issue, although these people have come forward with apparently some very cogent legal references to you. But even if there wasn't any legal written document and it's been abandoned, if the use is there, it's an easement. I've been told that by attorneys left and right. So unless the owner of the property says, stop using my property, that becomes a legal use and an easement of that property. Please consider that in your discussions. But don't be quick on this, and trust and verify. Keep in mind, half the attorneys in court, guess what? Lose. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, I'm Christy Anderson. I live at 40 Anchor Terrace. I walk Somerville every day from Anchor Terrace down Washington. I use the sidewalk on Washington, and then I have to walk on the street, actually on Beach Ave, the extension of Washington to St. Paul, where the next piece of sidewalk picks up. I am fully in support of the addition of an ADA compliant sidewalk on either side of the street of Beach, simply because there isn't one, unless you cross all the way over and into a non-compliant grass walkway. That grass walkway is very popular, but it is not ADA compliant, and it is very difficult for anyone with a disability to transgress. With that said, as far as the safety of kids getting hit on a sidewalk on that stretch, it's still better than them getting hit in the road, which would absolutely be terrible. There is no sidewalk there. It's only that grass pathway. There again, I am fully in support of the addition of the sidewalk itself off of the street in that stretch, which is the only stretch that is in question. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
Hello, Linda Loria. I live at 49 Anchor Terrace. I have lived there for 37 years. My husband's lived there 62 years. We have 3 properties that have been built on Anchor by my husband's family. We currently have a 4th generation family member living next door to me at 43 Anchor Terrace, which is the reason my daughter couldn't be here to speak, because her 1-year-old is not going to be up that late. I wasn't going to speak. I've sent letters to the board. I was a member of the White City Neighborhood Association board in the 80s, along with several other people in the audience, the last time we had to address a beach rights issue. It's funny because when I was walking my granddaughter this summer down the path, as we always do, because it's a little difficult for me to navigate now the Bateau Terrace hill, so it's easier for me to go along the east-west path, which some call Beach Ave, some call Lakefront, and then go down not the Beatree Beach access, but what would be the, I believe it would now be the east side of this gentleman's property. I had taken pictures actually and sent them to the board because I thought, why am I suddenly running into this gravel apparent driveway with a truck parked over the easement? And I was told, oh, it's just dumping from Washington Avenue. So I thought, you know what, I work 2 jobs, I'm, watching 3 grandchildren. I thought, you know what, let me go down tonight before I go and make a fool of myself. So I took some really bad pictures, but it's funny that some of the things that people have said here tonight, I actually have documented for you. The first, because I live on Anchor, it's my concern, right? So here's a sign on beach at Anchor and Bateau, no trespassing. Okay, so I have other pictures that are equally as bad. Took a picture of the fence that's now been constructed along that property in front of the lake that we're told, oh, it's to keep the sand there. If you can sell me a fence that'll keep my sand in place, I am all for it, because I've never heard of such a thing. But now there's the no trespassing sign and the fence, and this is what we were up against in the 80s. Okay, so now I thought, all right, let me go along this property. Where's the guardrail that used to be along Washington that barely kept people safe? It's gone along this property. The sign, pretty self-explanatory. There's a one-way sign right at that curve right before his property. One way, big arrow, because it's a problem for people, always has been. This particular resident has been seen actually driving the wrong way on this area. Beach access to deed holders only. That would be all of us. And then beach closed, 10 to 7. I can't even read it anymore. No access, no loitering, no alcohol. All right. Private property to the right. So that's an interesting sign. These are really bad pictures, and I really apologize, but the driveway, people had said at one of our meetings the other day that actual horseshoe driveway is in place. I'm like, no, nobody would do that. Who would do that? I certainly couldn't do that. Yeah, there's 2 entrances. It's about 20 feet wide at its widest part. I took pictures of the entrance off Washington and then the exit onto St. Paul and onto the easement. I am one of those people who do have those grandchildren who has another grandmother on St. Paul Boulevard. The first thing I thought of when somebody told me there's going to be a sidewalk put there is I could see this little baby who's going to be little all her life because she's, like all of us, short. She's going to pull right behind there, go into grandma's, not paying attention, she's going to get hit. And, okay, I guess that's all I have to say, but I wanted to, I don't know who would like these lovely pictures. You can submit them over there, we'll make sure they go into the record. All right, I won't take any pictures for anybody again, I promise.
These aren't that bad.
Next person, please.
Good evening, my name is Anita O'Brien. I live at 872 Washington Avenue, just around that famous corner that we're all talking about. Last summer, while my family was on the beach, Craig came over, introduced himself to me, and our conversation went something like this. Hi, I'm Craig. I own this land here. I bought it years ago, but I didn't build on it. My kids were young then, and I really needed a bigger place. So I went up to Rock Beach and built my place there. But now my kids have grown up, and I'm ready to build something for me. Nothing big, just a little place. Sounded good. A couple weeks later, I receive a nice pastel watercolor print of a really cute single-family dwelling perched on the property that we're talking about. And even I thought, because I'm a very visual person, wow, that's pretty cute. That might just blend in. On the back of this was words that Craig had written communicating this. I purchased the property knowing full well the easements and right-of-ways that are attached to the deed with full intentions to abide by them. My intention is to build a small arts and craft timber frame home that will fit in well with the neighborhood as opposed to the big family house I had needed to build when I originally purchased it. Some things I've heard since, and I haven't been able to attend any of the organized meetings around this, but I've heard 3-car garage, 27-foot gables on the 3-car garage, a 27-foot gabled house, easements being changed, right-of-ways being moved. I've heard about a driveway that starts on the Washington Ave side, right up by the beach access right-of-way there, and exits down very close to the Beatree right-of-way. I understand that Craig states that he can move this, if you haven't seen it, it's a really well-laid, U-shaped gravel driveway. But it's not permanent. It can be moved. And I also know that it wasn't moved despite some of the very quick outcry to that. It does go directly across this path that I have walked, just to set a precedent for 20 years of being a resident in this area. I've heard that Craig has yet to submit blueprints, which show the entirety of the house, and yet other building requests, just as we had tonight earlier, I lost count at like A22.45 when the gentleman was holding up all of the multiple layers and viewpoints of their drawings for a house, and yet I haven't heard that those have been provided to us. I heard that a contractor fence had been put on some of those renderings, and I'd not heard of fences being put on renderings for an approval of a site, but it makes my back go up and think, oh, is a fence going to be installed here? I've heard of trying to get approval for this footprint, but not being given a plan for a structure. I've heard that there are restrictions on the square footage for a site a structure that could be allowed on this property, and yet I don't see the questions being asked as to what that square footage might be. I don't claim to know all of the intricacies of the legal backgrounds of this particular property. I too worry about the driveways being so close to those easements. Pedestrians, animals, families that have the right to be there with an active driveway in place. You've heard some of the issues around that blind corner. I think that the approval of the location of those driveways should be very carefully considered with safety in mind, and I mean functional, reality-based safety. I'd love for you to understand what we live through with the arbitrary times of that flow of traffic around there as you're making that decision. I worry about the environmental impact on this area. Please note that what this area has already experienced in terms of the shifting of ground, it has been referred to and it has happened. It has raised the level of that property. Filling in the lower northern portion of the property with topsoil will not change the fact that it is a wetland area. I'd encourage you to be very cautious in making decisions that affect the quality and the purpose of these wetlands. They have a biological and ecological function that I think we should closely guard. I'm really genuinely mystified by what seems like deception and questions rather than clarity and transparency around this property. Shake my hand, tell me it's a small place just for me, show me something that my eyeballs responded positively to, and then call it an arts and crafts frame house even. On a whim, actually, I Googled arts and crafts style houses in case I was maybe missing something in the small letters there. If I could just encourage you to look that up. Some arts and crafts houses have been 8,200 square feet. And I hope that that's not where we're getting to. I'd like to submit the rest of my notes to you if I may, just so you have those as a record. I appreciate all of your good faith in making sure this is in compliance. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person, please, come right up.
Hi, everybody. Richie Wiederhold, 42 Harrison Terrace. I grew up in that area, White City. They affectionately called my father Lou the mayor of White City. He also worked for the town for 27 years. As far as high water goes on Lake Ontario, everybody's aware of the 2014 Great Lakes Initiative. And it's kind of blowing up on people because they're manipulating the levels of the water. As we speak, the DEC is changing their high water, low water, what is a floodplain, what is not. Being that we are so close to one of the 5 Great Lakes, we have to treat this as a special area. I want to address one thing. as far as we keep talking easement, sidewalk. Lakefront was always a walkway and a sidewalk that Mr. Knibble and a few others have graciously got out the history of an actual promenade and a boulevard. Over the year, it has closed in by nature. Underneath Lakefront, going east to west, all the way through to St. Paul Boulevard, used to be a sanitary sewer. No one talks about that. It is still there, except that back in 1972, we had Hurricane Agnes, and Somerville was pretty much underwater. It took this property right there was underwater at that time. We can research it. I'm not just throwing out Blarney here. I lived through it. The town moved the sewer down Washington, directly down Beach and into St. Paul, just where the supposed proposed sidewalk is going to be. I was watching some meetings on previously on the public channel, very interested in this, and you know, everybody says it's a dirt path. Well, it might have been a sidewalk. Well, it was, till it was washed away. And it's all in the history books, and it's all there. Maybe things that happened 40, 50 years ago don't really matter, including the deed of this boulevard, but we all believe they do. So, being from the area, I just want to conclude, there's many of us that have grown up together. Some of us haven't, but they've been there many years. And I think, I'm not speaking for everyone, but if I kind of may, we're all in disagreement with this project moving forward. When the applicant, if he gets approval to go ahead, I would hate to see the amount of variances that have to be met. I have built down there as a builder. I have built homes and additions. And I can recall things that we had to jump through that were amazing. One thing that was mentioned on the public channel tapes I was watching was, there's a couple light poles, and I've got to deal with RG&E to move them. Well, they're not just light poles, they're power poles. They have cable TV, somebody mentioned that there are phone poles. There are phone lines attached to them. So that's a pretty big undertaking, and I'm wondering what contingencies we would have against someone's word of mouth saying, I have a deal with this public utility. That's all I want to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Good evening. My name is Tim Camp. I'm at 309 Lakefront. I'm one house removed to the east of 301 Lakefront. Before I start my notes here, I want to just say that I agree with Chrissy from Anchor Terrace that a sidewalk, especially an ADA sidewalk, is much better than walking in the road. Much better. So any sidewalk is better than walking in the road there. I agree with the previous speakers that yes, that is a dangerous area with that curve. I do not object to a house being built on this highly restricted, privately owned parcel. From what I have observed from previous planning board meetings, and I did miss the last workshop, so I'm not currently up to date, most of the attention is centered around the one right-of-way the east-west path and a view. Our front door is less than 20 feet from this east-west path. It's part of our front yard. There are no hundreds of residents, Somerville residents, walking that path. There are people that walk that path. I'm not saying it's void of people walking their dogs especially. But there are evenings and days where there are more deer on that path, on that east-west path, especially in the evening. I'd like to submit this kind of over-embellished flyer that was stuffed in our mailboxes for you to see. They're also on the RG&E phone poles. They were laminated. So this went out to all the neighbors. Most of the neighbors are walking south to north to the water's edge. Majority of them are walking their dogs. I see them every day using the Washington Avenue and the Beechtree Beach access. No one's touching those accesses. They want to walk their dogs and take their young children to walk the shoreline, not 200 and 250 feet away from the shoreline on this east-west path. So we should put this in perspective. This view that's on this form in big letters in a couple places is a hot target word at these hearings. Jim Hinman, who you all know, he's the chairman of the zoning board, has on occasion pointed out, if you want the view through someone else's vacant lot, you had the right to purchase the lot just as this owner did. I've heard Jim say that a number of times, the latest of which was on Portland Avenue on a vacant lot. He couldn't be more accurate. Why are we even discussing someone's view at these meetings? There are plenty of beautiful views along the east-west path. And if that's not enough, we have a public tot lot at the end of Bateau Terrace with benches, donated benches, that face the lake on this path. There's plenty of views on the east-west path. Right in front of my yard, I have people setting up tripods to look at the wildlife down there. Mr. Ratusha has the right to build a house, whether it's on the north side or the east side of the east-west path. He has the right to put something there. He bought the land. He has paid a lot of taxes on that land for 18 years. And he probably, I'm sure he, like myself, insures it for liability. Sometimes, you know, we kind of think that Mr. Ratusha is the enemy. You know, he's let people park their overflow cars on his lot when they have a party, whether it's a birthday party or an anniversary party or a holiday party or a wedding. He's let people park their vehicles there to be a good neighbor. You know, and we forget that Mr. Ratusha let the town and his contractor put their equipment. There I go. Okay, sorry guys. The last thing, if I can say one last thing, there's a lot of problematic activity on that lot. There's underage drinking at night, loud, obnoxious noises. Police have to come down and really big bonfires down there. So, you know, with a house there, we could curb a lot of that. Thank you very much. Please give this guy a fair shake.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Hi, Michael Spitelli, 5236 St. Paul Boulevard. We're 4 doors to the west of the proposed house. I grew up in Irondequoit. We moved out when we had our kids, and then we moved back. So I've been a lifelong resident, my parents and myself. It's kind of crazy when people talk about views. I mean, they're not paying us the taxes on this property. He is. And my suggestion to somebody in the audience was, if you don't want them to build there, buy it from them and then keep it vacant. And like the previous person was just talking, there is a lot of issues down there at night. And even with the chief of police living 2 doors away from me, at night there's a lot of partying going on, and I think that by building a house there, that's going to eliminate a lot of that issue. But my question is, or my statement is this: you guys are the zoning board, correct?
Planning board.
Planning board. Okay, so the house has to be approved within all of the legal building codes and all that. You're the first step, correct?
They're the only step.
First site plan?
They're the only step as far as approvals at a board level, potentially for the building of the home. The property, if it were to be allowed to get built, would be subject to building code requirements at a building permit.
So that's what the deputy town attorney had mentioned, that there's not, you guys aren't legally obligated to look into easements. My main concern was him building north of the sidewalk. That was my main concern. All of our other properties in that area are not allowed to build any permanent structure north of the sidewalk. He's talking about moving it back and maybe being, I don't know exactly where this falls, if it falls on the sidewalk, but I'm totally agreeable to that. Also think that putting a sidewalk on the extension, ADA compliant, whatever it may be, is an excellent idea, because right now, I mean, you're walking in the street. I take my dog for a walk, and I'm walking on that extension right in the street, and that's dangerous. A sidewalk, it kind of boggles my mind. If somebody's going to jump a sidewalk, they're going to hit you while you're walking in the street. So that's a moot point. But a lot of the residents down there are opposed to this property being built because it's going to impair their view, and I don't think that's an issue that should be even considered at this level. If I'm wrong, correct me, but I just want to say that I'm in favor of this. The lot's been vacant for a long time. We played baseball down there when we were kids, and soccer and all that stuff, and it's someone else's property. He pays the taxes on it. So as long as he's within all the codes, he's within all the zoning, I'm for approving this. Thank you.
Next person, please. Hold on 1 second, please.
You can just actually hand me all the stacks and we can pass them down if you want. Yeah. Would that be easier?
Yeah, why don't we do that?
There you go, there's that. One out of each of these.
The gentleman can start speaking. Okay. I got all four.
Thank you.
We'll share down at this end if you want to stand on top of that.
There's two different drawings there.
It's okay, sir. Go ahead.
So I'm Frank Dorabella. I live at 26 Stone Terrace. I've been down here 44 years. And I used to write the history articles for the neighborhood association. So I'm pretty knowledgeable about the area. The reason I gave you those maps is that those are actually the town zoning maps. The big one is the town building and zoning map. And they all show the sidewalk. So obviously the town considers that to be real, and that it's a public or exist in the deeds at any rate. Now, the important one to me is this, the Beachy Beach one, which was drawn in 1915. It shows the walk, and that's the subdivision that's actually to Charles Salmon. So it's not an imaginary walk, it's actually a part of the subdivision. So it's in the deed and in the drawing for the whole Beachy Beach tract. Now, the 150 foot they're talking about is straddled on that where it says walk. That's actually Beachy Beach Park easement. Once you're to the walk, then it's Beachy Beach. And once you're on the walk, you're on the beach. There's no difference. And if you look at the other maps, all the way down in Somerville and Windsor Beach, that's where the beach starts, at sidewalk. So, getting back to the Supreme Court case, which is 3 years after they drew this Beachy Beach subdivision, that's when Charles Salmon tried to block that off and put fences up. So the neighbors sued him, Williamson, and he won. And ultimately, he decided there's a 50-foot right-of-way on Beach Avenue, which isn't shown on the black map here. There's a 150-foot easement he's entitled to, and then once he's to the sidewalk, they said he had a whole 380 feet in width for the entire beach. And that was for him and everybody that lives in Beachy Beach Park. So I don't see, my point is, the sidewalk defines where the beach is. And you can see that all the way down the whole subdivision there. So to allow him to work on or move the sidewalk, it's the same as moving the beach boundaries. So you're shrinking the beach or making it bigger for him. But in this case, you're letting him build on the beach. It doesn't matter where it is. So as far as the deed restrictions go and saying you can't enforce easements, I don't see how you can actually go against against an easement either and approve anything that would interfere with our rights to use the beach, or actually let anybody build on the beach parcel. Like all the way, all the other Windsor Beach, Somerville, they all have in the deeds that you can't build on it. And there's a letter from the town building department from 2000 that said all these are unbuildable plots. The ones that are all marked, the Glickman map will come. Spezio set those up when he sold the beach off. They all have in the deed that you can't build on them. So obviously the part Beachy Beach was not part of that, but obviously you can't build on that part either. So I don't see how you even have the authority to even act on this, honestly. But, so that's about it.
Thank you. Next person, please.
Good evening. My name is Rob Lindsay. I live at 5230 St. Paul Boulevard. I am in favor of building a house in that lot. My family's owned the house for many years. My wife and I have been there almost 4 years now. Just in the last 4 years, I've seen a lot of stuff going on at the property. I know people enjoy walking from the Washington Avenue down to the beach, and I don't see where he's stopping that from happening. I've run out numerous times yelling at kids that are smashing bottles and having big fires down there and all sorts of hours of the night. I think you got somebody that's willing to build a house there. It's going to make the neighborhood look better than a vacant lot. I think the town and maybe the people should all get together and do something that maybe, everybody could agree on. Moving the sidewalk or whatever, I think is a good help, a good start. He's willing to work with people. He's worked with us by moving the house back, excuse me, because we weren't happy with it being out towards the beach. He's moved it back, and it seems like he wants to try to make something work that everybody can live with. So I'm all for it. Thank you.
What was your address again? I'm sorry.
5230 St. Paul.
Thank you.
My name is Gary Rushton. I live at 819 Washington Avenue. And this project that they want to do, I don't appreciate it because it ruins my sight from my house. I can't see my lake. If they have a house in front of my house, then the person that lives across the street is going to ruin his vision to see the lake. And it's just not unnecessary to have a house built where a house has never been built. And I've lived in my house for 48 years, and there's never been a house right in that spot or on that sidewalk, because the sidewalk is all grass from the end of from St. Paul all the way up to Delta, and then the park. They have a playground. We don't need no sidewalk there, and we don't need no sidewalk from all the way up to the other parts. And we don't need a building in front of us so we can't see the things that we want to see. We want to watch these fireworks. We want to watch all this stuff. But if you put a house in front of it, we ain't going to be able to do. The kids won't be able to see the fireworks or even enjoy the fireworks with a house in front of it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else that wishes to address the board? If possible, please form a line if there's more.
My name is Joe Mullen, 21 Somerville Drive. Been a resident in the area for 37 years. I do use the sidewalk. I use it in the winter. I found it interesting, if not ironic, that the town would move a sidewalk that they've never paid attention to. Okay. The sidewalk begins at the west edge. It's not plowed. It's overgrown with trees. And as you walk to the east, several residents cover the sidewalk, put flower pots on the sidewalk. I think it's conversion, where they're converting the property. As you continue east, you do reach the Beatree easement, and you reach the Washington Ave easement. And yes, there is a lamppost there. The whole idea to me is, A, when you stand on that lot, it does highlight the environmental issues because the lot is abnormal. When you look to your east and you look to the west, it is the only raised property in front of that sidewalk. Everything else is down. So I too have concerns about what you're going to uncover. I happened to walk today through the yacht clubs, and they're doing something over there where they've dug a trench. And as you look through that trench, you see layers of plastic where it must have been a landfill. They've just exposed all that. What are we going to expose when he starts to build? I don't know. Nobody knows. So I think that needs to be looked at. I find it problematic that you would potentially resolve an issue without understanding whether the issue, the sidewalk easement, is a public easement or a private easement. How do you resolve an issue and say, well, if we get it wrong, sue in court? I don't know how you do that. That's trouble for me. In a previous meeting, there was discussion of a law that allowed decisions to be made when a view is obstructed. And the deputy town attorney, top of his head, said, well, no, it's a residential one, you have to allow them. And for me, my logic is, residential one has been there for how long? When was this law passed? The obvious intention of passing a law that references saving views would be to prevent that from someone building a home that then takes away a view. Anybody ever been to Peoria, Illinois? I was there one time, and I asked, what should I see? If I'm only going to see one thing in Peoria, Illinois, what should I see? And there's an area called Grandview. Teddy Roosevelt named it because it's a grand view. Do you think they'd allow a house to be put up there? People may not think views are much, but I take Washington Ave home for 36 years because I could come down Washington Ave and look at the lake. And I make that turn and I relax. I can go home. I can take my dog for a walk. I leave all the pressures at work. I see that lake, I relax. My wife bought that house in 1983 without me seeing it. Risky. But the idea was we had talked. We wanted to be near the lake, and we stayed there 37 years. So for me, I think that question has to be resolved. Is the law that allows you to prevent a building based on view, does that apply in this situation? just the fact that there's an opinion doesn't mean it's the actual law. I would suggest that if it was passed after the R1 classification was established, that it has some impact on this case. The last thing I leave you with is something that we're all sort of dancing around. If you go over to the city, just flip our Beach Ave sidewalk over, and you're in the city. They take great care of that sidewalk. They encourage people to walk it. And that's been going on since the tall ships were here, if not well before that. And here is our town, who is landlocked, wants to draw people into the town, has a wonderful resource, and you want to block one of the only public accesses. People park at Spezio and walk over. I don't know if there's 100 people using that sidewalk, but there's a lot. And I mean the easement east-west when I say sidewalk, not an ADA compliant sidewalk. Thank you.
Anybody else wish to address the board?
Oh, so much for your line.
My name's Jason Americh. I live at 5250 St. Paul Boulevard. It's would be the property immediately west of 301 Lakefront. So I'm just here to, I guess, share my experience, living in the area. I would say if there is a user of the path, or if there's a winner of path use, it would probably be myself and my family, more specifically my 9-year-old daughter. Goes up and down every single day, and most of you could probably vouch for that from being in the neighborhood. That corner that's being described on St. Paul Boulevard, it is a little bit of a dicey corner. My house has been, or my garage has been hit 3 times. The last one was pretty bad. It caused significant amount of damage, and it happened about 20 minutes before my kids were outside to go to school. It's something my daughter still has nightmares about. So I don't know that Craig's plans or property is going to change that particular corner, but I have noticed when people tend to miss the corner, they tend to hit my house as opposed to going to the right. In terms of building a house there, when I bought that property, I was aware that could be, a potential. And as a matter of fact, a few years prior to that, I bought 5184 St. Paul Boulevard, which would be a direct line of sight through that property. So Craig's house would go in front of that. And again, when I purchased that property, I thought there could be a chance that could happen, and that's kind of what you do when you buy properties, I suppose. So, I've really enjoyed being part of that neighborhood. There are a lot of people that use the east-west path in its current state. I can't speak to how many, but it's used year-round. Through the winter, people both going east and west, and then accessing the beach at Beatrix Beach and also at Washington. And I've observed, sometimes someone will walk the beach the whole length or take the easement up or any combination of those. And it's been, a really pleasant experience for the most part to be part of that canvas. I will say that having that lot be unsupervised or unpoliced at times has caused some challenges with personal property damage at my house, and some physical threats and things by people that I'm sure were out of character for the normal residents of the neighborhood, but that has happened at occasion. So my one request is, if something was to be approved to be built there, and given everyone's feedback, I couldn't even speculate what that might be, but that it would be kind of in the same line as all the other houses on Lakefront and not obstructing the easements in any way, so people still have the same access to the beach and to the east-west that they have. Having a sidewalk there would be very helpful, and I would again make the recommendation that if that sidewalk was put in, that it would connect to the St. Paul sidewalk kind of right to the west. That would give people nice access to both the park and to the access to the beach. So that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Lois Schaefer, and I live at 5168 St. Paul Boulevard, and I've been there 39 years. I've heard mention the land is higher at Beetree Beach. Well, yeah, and this happened around 2002. I had broken my ankle the fall of 2001, and I was wearing a boot and had like 6 surgeries to save my legs, so it was life-changing. Well, at that time, the Beetree Beach suddenly was filling up with dirt, like massive amounts of dirt and building debris. And I heard that, well, Carla Voss is building a house, and the house that was on that property ended up down at the beach. And I wondered if I would ever walk through that path again. Well, now I do, and I would like to continue to do so. I don't have a problem with Craig building a house. I would like it back in line with the other houses, and I just feel a bit disrespected by the process that, you know, come up with a plan that complies with what everyone else has. Can't the house be in line with everything else? Can't it be a size that's reasonable? You know, 3-car drive-through garage, really? But that's just my honest opinion. I feel like it needs to be in keeping with the neighborhood. And if it's right on the beach, wow, you know, it's going to split the beach into 2 beaches, and it's just going to be strange. So, thank you very much.
Anybody else wishes to address the board? With that, I'm going to close the public hearing. Would the applicant like to please come back up and address some of the comments?
I took 6 pages of detailed notes so I can try to address them in a general form, but if there's specific questions that I'm missing, please let me know if you picked anything up. You know, issues relating, you know, I was very appreciative of the fact that the board asked the question about which easements, the Beetree Beach easement or the east-west easement. As you know, the plan does not, in fact, the Beetree Beach easement at all. We're off that easement. We do have a driveway that goes through that near the storm sewer easement, but that's the only encroachment within that. I'm going to let Dan speak to the issues related to the east-west easement. People mentioned the seeker law and the seeker form that we're all very familiar with on the planning board and the environmental issues that are there. I stated in my presentation, what are the environmental issues? Wetlands, well, there are no wetlands here. Yes, we have Lake Ontario. We're over 200 feet away from the edge of Lake Ontario. We have no, don't need any permits from the DEC. We don't need any permits from the Army Corps, and we're not in an EPOD. EPOD is an environmental protection overlay. I know this board's familiar with it. That protects certain factors, environmental factors of the town, steep slopes, tree lots, and things like that. We are not in any of those. We also talked about drinking water. I don't believe that any wells are used for drinking water and running quite near this area. We all have public water. The issues with the curve. The Washington Street curve going to Beach Ave is a tight 90-degree curve. There's a light pole right at that curve. I can understand that is a turn, but it's not unlike any turn we have in other streets within our town. It's a little different than the St. Paul curve. St. Paul, I think, traveled at a higher rate of speed. I can understand Jason's issue with a car careening into his garage. I know that's a safety issue, but I don't see that much of an interaction on the Washington Street curve, especially if we put sidewalk adjacent to the road and get people off the pavement. That's part of our intention as well. So I understand the kids issue with that. I wanted to speak a little bit to the map itself. Someone mentioned about that we don't own to the lake. We, as the person said correctly, it's the mean high water mark. There are two lake levels shown on that. One was shown about 10 years ago, and then the one that's further south is the one that we updated the survey work last year during the large storm, large events we had with all the water on Lake Ontario. So, we don't really own into the water. We own to the mean high water. A lot of the graphic representation is drawing a red line to show you the property line and easement lines, but we don't intend to own into Lake Ontario. There's also a statement made about a false deed. I was given the copies of the deed, so I can review that. But I'd also like to show the board that there was a filed map in the current configuration, a subdivision map that was filed in Library 216 of maps, page 5. That's filed at the Monroe County Clerk's Office. Also, the tax map reflects the property dimensions as I show. So it shows that Washington Street has been kind of cut in half as it went north and towards the lake. So it's nothing that we created, and it's reflected in several documents, and that's what he's been paying taxes on. There's been a lot of questions about vandalism and drinking and partying on the lake. I really can't speak to that. It's not an engineering issue. There is a question about the hill. There is a hill. There's about a 10-foot grade change going down Beach Avenue from Washington to St. Paul. So that area where we're proposing a house is on a knoll. If there was some historic fill, I think I'm aware of that. I don't know if it really, the road has always been in the same configuration. There might have been some fill placed there. I can't speak to that. Someone wanted an impact statement. I don't think that this hits any threshold for an impact statement. The height of the building has been talked about a lot. As I said numerous times, we are compliant with both the R1 code and the height requirement that is required in the lakefront redevelopment district. Issue has been made about not showing architectural plans. I mean, this board's used to this process. Site plan showing a single-family house is different than a commercial. This is an infill lot. We really are not going to show you all the shutters and the windows. We don't have an architectural review board for this process. That's done at the counter when they pull a building permit. So the site plan process goes through you, and then the house itself. There's a lot of houses that get built or additions built that don't go to this board, and that's the process done by staff. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, Carrie. I think that. Trish Carroll pointed out that, it'd be good for a single-family house because in her neighborhood there's a 3-story house being built. Well, in this lakefront revitalization area, we can have the ability to build townhouses and other things here that the height restriction would be a lot less and have more of an impact on this property. Craig doesn't want to do that, but I think the townhouse is 35 feet high if you wanted to build townhouses here. And again, that's an allowed activity in this overlay district, which we're not proposing. The sidewalk, east-west sidewalking, bringing that to the north side of the paved surface. We worked with Mr. Kiley on that. We talked about it one time. I think the planning board even recommended, hey, can we put up another sidewalk further north? But as the public has clearly pointed out, the town of Arundequoit really doesn't maintain that sidewalk. But if it is brought towards the roadway within the right-of-way of Beach Avenue, it will be. So it'll be constructed per town standards per Craig and maintained by the town. I don't think the town of Arundequoit has the ability to maintain sidewalks that are 100 to 200 feet off the road. There's been conversation about existing driveway built, and I can say for a fact, because we were retained as engineers and surveyors to do some work on the Washington Street project over last summer, that was used as a yard on Craig's property. So there was a lot of construction going on, and I think as a favor to Craig and the town, that there was dropped a load of stone and cleaned it up. So when they left, there was just a staging area for him. So there was not all the construction debris that was there during construction. I know the town was familiar with that, especially the sewer department. A lot of, again, going back to environmental issues, wetlands. We don't need a stormwater management permit that this board's normally familiar with. And I'm trying to think if there's anything else I can speak to. The views, I've done a lot of work on the lake, a lot of applications, and, it always comes down to view. But this is a private piece of property. He has owned it for almost 18 years, and it's not a public property. There are some private rights. The Petrie Beach is not public access. So my point of view, the only public access to the people of Arundequoit in general is the Washington Street extension. and we don't propose on blocking that at all. Someone mentioned, well, what comes out of the ground during construction? Could this be like the yacht club? You know, normal construction activity of this home will be minimal due to the fact that we're not proposing a basement, so we're not digging down 8 feet. So there'll be no basement proposed. That's to work in unison with the land, very minor grading in where we propose the house. Bringing the house back in line, I think Jason spoke to that. Our house is generally about the same setback off Beach Avenue as Jason's house, so that's kind of why we moved it back. That's why we're impacting the east-west easement. So that's just kind of referring to general terms of the notes I've taken, and I can let Dan speak to more.
A few of the speakers mentioned a 3-car garage, if I recall.
Yep.
It's been changed, correct? Or?
It's still a 3-car garage. It's a 900 square foot garage, which is compliant to zoning. If you look at Jason's lot, there's a 4-car garage over there. There's a lot of 3-car garages in the town. The town limits the garage size to 900 square feet, and we're within that.
So it is still a 3-car garage?
Still a 3-car garage.
The latest one that we were given, I can tell you that.
Yeah, the current one that we have shows 2 overhead doors on each side of the garage and has a line that was modified about a month ago at one of the board meetings.
Yeah. So it could be, so in the garage size, door size could be a 2 garage door for 1 bay, or 1 door for 2 bays. So I guess, but we are going to adhere to the 900 square foot for the garage, and I think that's noted on the site plan. We're not going to go over that. We're not asking for a variance for garage size.
That's what moved, because previously it was like
Correct.
1,000 square feet.
Yeah, we wanted to make sure we met code.
Okay.
There still seems to become some confusion about fencing, so I wanted to give you an opportunity to address that.
Thank you very much. So we show a very bold fence along our property. That is a silt fence that is used during construction. It's required to prevent erosion and sand and water migrating off our site. So that's a very thick line that we show. So that'll be put up prior to construction, maintained during construction, and after the yard is seeded and maintained, that'll be removed. It's not intended to block access.
And for the record, you have that so that it does not block the current east-west path.
Correct.
And can I also just verify or clarify for the board that this item does not require environmental review? This is a type 2 action under seeker, so no further environmental analysis is required for a construction of a single-family home.
Can I just ask about the RG&E agreement? Has that been put into place, the MOU on that, or?
No, what Mr. Restucci has done at this point is got an estimate of what's going to cost for him to move those lines, and a verbal agreement that they would move them. We really can't enter into a contract and really get that finalized until he gets approval from this board. And then we would give RG&E a new easement in the future location where they want it.
All right.
Do you know of any other utilities, Spectrum?
I'm in the hall trying to take notes, and I was trying to understand what we're talking about in the historic sewer. From what the current sewer is, there's a manhole at the north end of Washington Street. It runs north down the, let's call it the grass side, runs east along the grass sidewalk, and then it runs west along Beach Ave. You can see it to another manhole, kind of near the storm sewer easement near the end of the proposed sidewalk that we have. I think it's black on your plan. So that's the route of the current sewer.
Right, I was referring to, I think one of the residents mentioned that the poles have RG&E as well as phone and data and...
Yeah, those are kind of moved in unison with RG&E, so...
I'm just wondering if you knew of any others.
I do not know of any.
And typically whoever owns the poles, I presume it's RG&E here?
Yes.
Is the one that coordinates that?
Correct.
So, okay, I just want to make sure.
The house is also fully code compliant, right? Doesn't require any variances, as some people suggested. I have a question about the elevation that you provided, even though you didn't need to, on the map. It shows the garage doors. Looks like they face
So...
Go ahead.
So that was just, and one of the board members asked to see the peak of the elevation of the garage, so we worked on just showing that, and I needed some way to show intent. So that's not a detail of the proposed house, just giving you an idea of the peak of the garage, and it's less than the house peak.
Okay. Did
did you want to present anything else?
Let me ask, Dan.
I guess the only things that I would add would be that there was some, a few people alluded to how can anybody build anything here, and we quite early on provided the board with a decision of the New York State Supreme Court from 1985 where this parcel and where could a house be built on it, and if so, where, were thoroughly litigated, and the decision clearly allows for a house to be located where it is proposed in this plan. And as to the RG&E, back when Mr. Restuccia first bought the property, RG&E agreed at Mr. Restuccia's expense that if he sought it, that those poles could be removed and placed underground. And I have correspondence back from 2003 to that effect, and he has reinstituted conversations, based upon this new plan. So it does not seem like it's going to be an issue at all, so long as he's willing to pay for it. I don't know if the board had any other questions.
Just real quickly, though, that plan is contingent upon him building this house, right? He needs those poles out of the way to build the house in its current location.
Use the microphone. Use the microphone, please.
Somebody's got to use a microphone, not me.
Please
The
introduce
RG&E
yourself.
actually did agree to bury the poles or move the poles closer to the road. I accepted it in thousands and thousands of dollars. I was going to pay the extra, like I said, thousands of dollars to bury them, just to clean the property up for everybody's view,
Right, but that's not my point. My point being that the current state that of the plan that you've given us has pulled it south, which puts it on top of those
So the poles would be moved. I have an agreement. I just have to sign and write a check.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Please,
it.
for the record, please state your name and address.
Oh, it's Craig Restuccia, owner of the property.
Any other clarification, Alan? Alan, are you good?
That's gotta go to the chair.
At the moment, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What is this for?
We don't know.
John asked me to give it to you.
Okay, thank you.
John wanted us to give you a gift.
And Mr. Chairman, that's just a copy of the current tax map showing the configuration of the lot with the subdivision map that I mentioned. I think it's 216, page 5.
Thank you. Mr. Schraber, you're all set? That's a wrap?
Any more questions for me?
Any more from the board? Not at this time.
All right.
I promise we will take a break after this.
Oh, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Comments? Concerns? Who wants to go first?
So I'm wondering what the board thinks about the sidewalk easement and what we think or how we make a determination on if that is public or private, because that's important. 1. 2, setting that important and relevant argument aside, all the other properties along that length of the beach are behind this, whatever that is. So putting the house over this line is different than everything else that's been over there. And the reason that we're looking at this in this situation, the reason that we consider views is where we wouldn't in other situations is because of 235-76, which asks us to consider view sheds and vistas. So I just wanted to make sure that I know there was some confusion, and understandably, because we wouldn't necessarily consider that in other parts of town. The reason that we consider that in this part of town is because it has a specific additional number of waterfront regulations. So even if the sidewalk easement argument is set aside for a minute, the placement of the house is still impacting views in ways that existing houses are not currently.
It's only impacting, I mean, yes, I agree with you. 235 says we can look at views, we can discuss that. We've discussed that at previous meetings and workshops and so on and so forth. And I do think that the regulations allowing us to bring that into effect, have us looking at things like heights and so on and so forth. With that being said, this is an approved single-family lot. A house can be built here, and a house could be, if a house were proposed on the south side of the whatever it is,
right,
path, it would inevitably be rotated 90 degrees, because it would have to be to fit there, and it would actually impact the views in a more onerous way.
I believe that the house, with or without the garage, can fit to the south of whatever that is.
Sure, agreed. Agreed, but I'm just saying the shape would most likely, I actually measured what the dimensions are and so on.
It would be up to Mr. Restuccia to decide how
Understood.
big
I'm
the
just
house.
stating that either way, a view is going to be affected here. And
Yes.
Right.
I guess.
And just the simple fact that a view is affected doesn't mean that it
Absolutely not.
denied.
Correct.
Just
And
because
I
the view
agree
is
that a
affected.
single-family home can be built here. I'm just trying to consider the placement
Sure.
in consideration of 23576.
I understand that. I got you. I would just like to, I guess, piggyback on your first comment about the east-west path situation. And I think I understand what our attorney explained at the beginning of the meeting about, private easements and so on. However, I'm really struggling with how do we make a decision when we don't know what this thing is. And I don't have an answer for that. I don't have a complete understanding or guarantee whether this is public, private, neither, both. I don't know. And so that's my biggest issue, that I'm not sure at the moment how to have a finding based upon that. If there's nothing there, then unfortunately I think this plan as presented can probably be approved to public's dismay. But if there is no easement there, then I believe that is acceptable. So I don't know how to move forward at the moment.
So I was gonna ask the question, could some type of contingencies be put on this, or?
You could absolutely make it a condition of your approval that the applicant establish that the applicant has the right to build the house where it's proposed on the property, and that's something that that staff could verify. And just to add, I know I'm kind of inserting myself here, but the one thing I'd like for you to consider is that if you were to deny the application or to require that the applicant move the house to the south, assume that maybe you're incorrect and that there is in fact no easement. What would it mean to restrict the applicant from building his house on the north side of his property? I'm not sure if you're familiar with takings law, but there's no basis in the code to require a property owner to move his proposed house that far to the south, that far away from the water. And so if this board was incorrect about a determination that there is in fact some sort of easement there that can't be built across, that the building can't be placed on it, that could be problematic. So I would strongly advise the board not to make an assumption that there's an easement there and that therefore the house must be built to the north, because that could be problematic legally.
But going back to Bradley's point of views, how do we,
we can't take into account 23576 and say the effect on the views, we want it to be pushed south?
Yeah, but I don't even know how you can discuss.
Just asking.
Yeah, right. I don't even know how you can discuss the effects of the views because right now we don't know if the house can be built on the north side, can't be built across the easement, not across the. I mean,
Was thinking, in my mind, in consideration of the second argument, setting aside this, whatever the easement is, yes or no, considering the placement of the other houses in the properties that are adjacent, whether or not there is just setting aside that easement altogether and just saying that it has to be to the south based on the properties that are adjoining.
right, but I don't know that you can make that argument.
That's what I was
if there
asking.
is no easement, because if there is no easement, then there's no precedent to say it's behind
I'm
anything.
totally like setting the easement, whatever it is,
Understand,
aside.
But I'm saying you're moving it south of what then?
The adjoining properties, so that it's in line with the properties that are congruent or the same.
But I asked the applicant, his agent, about the setback of the house to the west of that, and they're comparable, so I'm not sure what we're moving it in relation to.
They're comparable. My understanding is that the setback from the street is comparable, not the setback from the water. So he was saying that
Well,
the
it's showing
property
on
to
the
the
map
west,
here, the right-of-way. From the right-of-way, they're almost the exact same setback.
right from the street right away.
Right.
Oh,
So yeah,
I'm
sure.
not sure
that's
where I'm measuring what the setback
that's
is gonna be.
fine, you know, and of course, but then
I
there's
just want to
also
go back to your point to begin with, and the more fundamental question here is, how do I be the most concerned that I'm actually doing what's right by the town, what's right by the citizen, not knowing if this is a public or private easement on approving this plan that's before me? If I say yes to this tonight, and I'm wrong, what does that mean? Or if I say no to this tonight, and I'm wrong, what does that mean?
This board cannot impact any easement rights. This board doesn't have the authority or jurisdiction to change property rights, to determine whether a valid easement exists, to determine whether a valid deed exists, or to determine who can walk across anyone else's property. So you approving the site plan does not prevent anyone who may be the beneficiary of an existing public or private easement from asserting those rights. There are actions available in court, and this decision would have no impact on whether a judge would determine that there is in fact a valid easement. And like I said before, if the applicant decides to build over someone's easement, the applicant will have to live with that if a court determines that there's an easement there.
Right, and that's 100% understood and agree with that. But if there's potential information that is known that indicates that there may be an easement, wouldn't it make more sense to clarify what that easement is prior to making an approval? At least determining whether it is a public easement?
Hasn't the town already done
fair
that?
point.
Haven't they looked into whether there is or is not an easement?
That's not, I mean, that's the applicant and the applicant's, counsel and so on. It's their job to answer that, and,
I thought they did.
Well, counsel stated that they do not believe there's any easement across there. However, we heard, not one testimony, we heard multiple testimonies with legal documents. Now, I have not seen any of those in great detail. I know some of them were emailed to us today, which I have not had a chance to read.
They don't give you time at work to look up all that?
No, work doesn't like that. The boss is not
I got you.
fond of that. So, I just think that it's the cart before the horse if we're approving it, even contingent upon. I actually believe that, if this is not an easement, that this is an approvable project as drawn.
Right.
If there's an easement, I think we may have a different story, which means he's got to redesign, which means we're approving something that we know is not going to work.
Can I just add on to this?
Please.
Okay. If it's a public easement, the public would reasonably be in that area, or could reasonably be in that area. If it is not a public easement, say it's not an easement at all, then the public's not going to be there, and we don't have to worry about the view shed with that easement.
Correct.
Okay?
Agreed.
So here's
I agree.
that's your question.
Yes.
Is we're talking about view sheds. If it's not a public easement, we don't have to worry about it. If it is, we should worry about it, right? Okay. So going back to Dan's point, right, and your point, the only person that has to make that determination, it's not the town, it's not us, it's the applicant's attorney. The applicant's attorney has come in here on public record and said that there is not an easement there. They have not found record of an easement. Okay? So their attorney, and this is not a bias, I'm just saying, they've come in here and they have said that, and he has made that statement on public record. So you
But
go
on
off
the, on the same token, though, we've heard time and time again from members of the public that said that this is an easement and they have documented proof of it.
We've also heard from the town at one point during this that that was a public easement, and that's what facilitated the discussion that we had about moving it, shifting it, all those other ideas. So it's not just public that is saying that this may or may not be public easement. The town, during the course of this case, sort of indicated that it was a public easement.
But whose job is it to tell us if it is or isn't?
It's the applicant's job, and I'm not disputing that fact. All I'm saying is that if we have information that may make it look otherwise from what was submitted, are we not doing our due diligence, knowing that it could be an issue now, of saying, let's try to straighten this out now, rather than forcing it to go to court?
Sure.
That's all I'm saying.
And if I can just provide a little bit of context for the applicant's comments, I think that the applicant, whether you agree with this or not, I think the applicant has at least attempted to address that and brought up the existence of a very old easement that ran to a railroad company. And so that the applicant contends has been abandoned. So that would explain why people sort of believe that there's an easement there, why they've been using this pathway to access the water and to walk across the property. But the applicant's contention, I believe, is that it was an old easement that was just to the railroad and that it's since been abandoned. So that it doesn't exist anymore. That's what they're saying.
Please.
So here's
Let us get through this.
If
Excuse me, members in the audience cannot speak from the audience. Thank you.
what would keep then the restrictions from the build north of the easement on the other properties?
Can I interject here?
Yeah.
I know there was a point of reference made in the past, town staff, and I'm not sure under what direction, made reference to private deed covenants, restrictions in people's private deeds for properties, incorrectly stating that we would not be able to issue a building permit.
No, I'm not saying on this property.
No, I'm saying on the adjacent properties.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, so that's what I'm speaking about. So in the past, and I've seen letters submitted and letters on file from town staff providing documentation on inquiries about those parcels that are adjacent to a property that has has been improved with a primary structure, and some statement to the effect of that's a regulated coastal erosion hazard area, may not be buildable, and that there's deed restrictions on building of structures, things on that property. The town took a position back then of enforcing what was essentially a private deed restriction they should not have. So the town now, understanding what our limits are as far as what we can and can't enforce, realizing that the CHA, the coastal erosion hazard area, that's a limiting factor of what can and can't, that where construction can happen or what kind of construction can happen. That goes in concert, and there's also floodplain regulations that come into play along many of these properties of what can get built and what can't. But the deed restriction is not something, if it's a private deed, unless it was deeded to the town cannot limit the development based solely on the deed.
So
for
the
those parcels.
testimony that I heard about the flower pots being put onto the path, basically to block it or to convert it, that is not a town issue, and that actually could be a shed as opposed to a flower pot at this point.
I'm not sure if I could speak to that. I'm just saying that
I guess that would make my decision about this a lot
Well,
easier.
I would argue then that that's where this particular provision of the code comes into play. that this would be what they mean, that you can't, that, you know, all of these homes are built in this way, and so now we find out that it is possible to build forward of that for whatever reason, and we say, but you can't build there because now you're blocking views and vistas from the adjacent properties.
No, I'm sorry, I'm gonna stop one other thing. So the other limitation for those adjacent parcels, this is one large parcel that fronts on the street and runs continuously to the water's edge. Many of the other parcels that are east and west of this, they are landlocked parcels. The parcels that directly front on the water are landlocked. They do not have a principal structure located on them. And so you couldn't construct, you're limited on what you can construct because you're lacking a principal structure.
What if you what if you combine the lots?
We'd have to take a look at, the assessor would need to address and chime in on that. This is, yeah, I'm not gonna, it is certainly a complex issue or series of issues in this neck of the wood. Lakefront is not a designated right-of-way, and so how there are many properties that have that as a name, we need a time machine to go back in time to figure that out.
So the other properties then would not own the right-of-way? It's not on their property?
The
properties that are adjacent to the west of this property, that easement,
shows-
the east-west walkway that we're calling an easement, is not on their property?
I have to look at individual survey instrument maps, but I believe on most of the properties, they make that.
That is their property line.
But they make there's a marcation of some pathway reference to similar to the Lieber reference on the survey instrument map here, that there's some pathway, but there's no gap, there's no legal right-of-way, there's no gap between parcels on either side of a walkway. It's property line, and then in some cases, the individual survey maps of those parcels will show
up to the water line that they own that property.
And then also where the two lots meet, along where that delineated historical path has been, there'll be references in some of the surveys to that.
There seems to me there's only a couple of options here. I mean, number one, regardless of whether it is or is not with easement, whether they have proven or the town has proven that there are no easements, I think we're between a rock and a hard spot when we talk about it. That it's a decision that needs to be made, and I think we need to make it.
Well, what if, I asked before about contingencies and kind of got different feelings on that, but what if we made it a condition that the applicant actually has to provide a title review to the town proving that they have the right?
That goes back to Spencer's
Let me
thing.
ask the lawyer.
You could make that a condition that the applicant provides a title review, proving that they have the right to build on the lot and that there's no easement across the buildable area. That could be a condition of your approval. And I think that would be relatively, I would think it would be relatively straightforward for the applicant to demonstrate if they, as long as they've, obtained a title report. It's simple analysis.
I'm just asking the board if that would
Yeah,
help.
I think that would help me a lot with this.
Me too.
It would help me.
Yeah, I understand the issue about what you've just outlined, but my second argument that I've made about the line of houses and regardless setting the easement, whatever it is, aside, that's a second argument that I haven't heard anybody say. I mean, I'm unconvinced by what you guys, do you have anything else? Why?
You're unconvinced there?
I'm unconvinced there. Like, I understand that we can't, if this easement is not a thing and then we force him to build south of the easement, then that could be bad. But I'm looking on the other side here and setting aside the easement issue entirely and just looking at the character of the neighborhood and the houses that are to the east and west, and considering 235, 76 and the views, and thinking about how we've done this before with the placements of houses and views from those other adjoining parcels. So this, I hear what everyone's saying about the easement argument, and that's murky, but this one is still clear to me.
I'm not having the same problem that you're having with the view shed on this. I am having a little problem that I don't have the full plan in front of me, but I also know that that's not required, that
Right.
they have to provide that to the town. I'm happy with the fact that I'm looking at a garage that is now lower than the rest of the house, which actually starts to do a little bit more protection of the view shed. I just don't see that something that is this size is going to diminish the view shed in such a way that is going to be an obstacle for anybody living there currently that would have the same access that I would have to that beach.
Okay.
I find myself just walking this site, going east to west, across that empty lot without a house. Then I'd like to see you, some way or other, through technology, make that little house stand there for a while and let me see how much of a site I've lost as I walk the 30, 40 feet across there and still see pretty much a nice looking lake, a nice looking view, but just not sitting on my duff.
I actually think I understand that.
There was also discussion about the sidewalk and how that should be constructed, and I'm wondering board's thoughts on timing and those types of items. Although I'm still unconvinced about the last argument, I think that this is also a topic that needs to be discussed about the timing of the construction of the sidewalk and the easement being recorded, and making sure that the passage is, if it unencumbered, if it is even relevant, and connectivity.